You're right.
Good evening, everybody. We're talking TV from our youth at the moment.
That's
So, what
right.
was on Sky TV?
Yeah, man, that's how I could watch for the first time the Brady Bunch in different strokes because they were not on
Okay,
Portuguese TV.
right.
Uh,
I
but
saw
we had.
The Brady Bunch was on in syndication
Mhm.
during the '70s, so it was like on at I think it was on at 7 o'clock at night in the '70s on Channel 5 or 11. I forget which one of the local stations, and that was just when we weren't allowed to have the TV on until 7 at night. So the first thing I'd watch at night was the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, at the time, what I liked watching was Parker Lewis Can't Lose
Oh yeah,
and
I
Star
remember
Trek: The
that.
Next Generation.
There we go.
And The Simpsons also was on TV. No, there were a lot. There were not a lot of people with satellite dishes, but
Yeah.
there was enough of a momentum to that a lot of people were able to tell their friends about cool stuff that was on Sky One,
Uh-huh.
and that's how some of the TV shows ended up coming to Portugal because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles they had the movie, but the cartoon was on only 2 years later, and so and so that's how because of Sky One, that's how the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon came over, and then I also had the Simpsons was also one of those phenomenon, and trying to sell the an older conservative viewership who still remembered when TV was off before midnight and there was no TV before 6 p.m. The concept of prime time cartoons.
No. It's a hard
Yeah,
sell.
yeah. And then there was as the kids, it was amazing because there was nothing
Right.
like The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And also we had the wrestling, and a lot of my friends would ask me to tape them the wrestling shows,
Ah.
and because there was a time when that thing was very successful on Sky, and the shows were made specifically for Sky because there were wrestlers who did not appear on the UK broadcast.
Ah.
Um, but we ended up having three regular weekly shows, and they had the Sky Sports channel, but that one we had it was a subscription channel, so I couldn't watch it.
Uh-huh.
And that's where they showed the pay-per-views, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, whatever was that I forgot which. I think they had about 4 pay-per-views at the time that they showed, but I don't remember their names. And I'm trying to remember some of the storylines that they had. I remember when Tugboat went heel.
The heel turn.
Yeah, he had a heel turn and he turned into Typhoon, and they teamed him up with Earthquake, and they became the Natural Disasters.
I think they stopped doing this in wrestling at some point, but there used to be a term we'd have that crossed over into comics that we used in wrestling all the time. A phrase we'd call it wrestling villain syndrome. That's because it used to be like, especially in the '70s, if a wrestling villain became too popular, they'd make him a good guy.
Mhm.
I think they kind of stopped doing. I stopped watching wrestling, but I think they stopped doing that sometime in the '80s or '90s. Villains could just be villains. But like in the '70s, if a villain got too popular, they'd make him a good guy. And we used to say that about comic book villains sometimes. Once they got too popular, they'd often become heroes.
Yeah,
And they usually also pretty them up as well.
Yeah.
Remember the character Marrow, who was a villain in the X-Men books for a long time as a Morlock. The moment she became more popular, all of a sudden she became a prettier character. And that was one of the many things that I noticed they changed.
Because pretty is good, ugly is
Yep.
evil.
Exactly. Unless you're Venom. They kept them ugly, which I'm happy.
Yeah. I don't think it happens anymore. I think it used to happen for a brief time, but nowadays you can make a villain a hero and it's all okay.
I think that's
Somehow.
because of, was it because of Steve Austin? Because
Yeah.
I wasn't watching wrestling by then, but what I've read is that they couldn't set, Steve Austin was always being sold as a villain,
Uh-huh.
and everybody liked him. I guess it was just the thing with his moves, especially for a while I could watch WCW instead of WWF.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when all of the guys were ditching McMahon to go to Ted Turner's. There were a lot of guys there. Yeah, there were a lot of guys doing it, but all of a sudden that thing collapsed. I think that Turner was spending a lot of money on it.
Yeah, I can't remember the story behind it, but I remember the collapse.
Yeah, it was the NWO invasion.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the thing is, it got to a point where everybody was NWO. Hulk Hogan had changed his name to Hollywood.
Though I'd always heard that that wrestling federation existed on Ted Turner because Ted Turner loved wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So that and it may have even been a money loser, but I think he sold Turner Broadcasting, and I think that's when it collapsed. I'm not 100% sure. I'm only going by memory, but I think that had something to do with it. He kept it going. He loved it, so he kept it going. But I think the new owners were like, we don't care. It's gone. And that Wilson, do you remember? I'm saying this just because Pat Rousseau just posted some pages from. Do you remember the lettering Bible that they used to give out?
I heard of it. I did not have it. I was never, because I went in there and then the freelance work I was doing coloring. I didn't learn and do lettering until I was there for a while, and I wasn't doing lettering for Marvel. So
then it would have been the hand lettering days too.
Mm-hmm.
It was
this, and I never hand lettered. So I knew of it, but I never actually had gotten a copy of it. I would have loved to have a copy of it just to have that kind of ephemera in general from
Marvel. Right. Todd Klein, I think, has written blogs about it, showing lots of examples. And Pat Brousseau just posted some scans of his. What it was the lettering Bible it was a photocopy collection of lots of cover copy, lots and lots of cover. A lot of it done by Danny Crespi and other people. But it was like whenever on staff, like when I was there, and when there was hand lettering done, there was always. There was 3 or 4 of them at all times because there were so many books. The on-staff letterers did, Darren Auk, Dave Sharp, Steve Dutro, Ed Lazzolari, Chris Eliopoulos. There was a bunch of them over the years. But what they would do was they would do the cover copy, i.e. the lettering that goes on the front cover of the comic book, You're a sitting duck for the Golden Archer. That's the one I just looked over at my other screen and saw that. And so somebody at some point, I don't even know who it was, collected a bunch of the cover copy, and put a bunch on a page and made photocopies of it, all from the 70s mostly and into the 80s. And whenever a new letterer would come on staff, they'd hand them this Bible and have them go through it and practice the different styles of cover copy. And then when an editor wanted cover copy, they'd come in and they'd flip through the Bible and go, I want something like this. And then the on-staff letterer would give them something like that. So it's a real interesting book just to look through. Like I said, if you go to Todd Klein's blog, just put Todd Klein letterer in Google for anyone out there. You'll find his blog, and he did posts. He's got posts of a whole bunch of this different stuff, but it's real interesting just to kind of look at. I would, like I said, I wish I had a copy of it too. I'll have to get one sometime because they're out. All the ex-letterers have copies of them because, of course, they
Right.
photocopy them for themselves too.
Mhm.
But it's just fun stuff to kind of look at all the cover copy from the 70s, like by itself without the cover.
Right.
And it's just such a lost art.
It completely is. It's definitely one of those things as a letterer, because I came into lettering a lot later, that I would want to have just
Yeah.
for the reference, just because it's put together that way. But there's been like a few different things like that circulated through Marvel that
Right.
I recall, where they would be like, I know that I only have a couple of them, and one day I got to just sit down and get all the paperwork and put it together. Because I know I have something that has like the outline to something like Nightcrawler and how
Mhm.
he should be drawn and what to pay attention to. And on the note, it even says, when you draw his tail, it should always be coming out of the side. If it's going straight down, John Romita Sr. is going to hunt you down. So we just like this little note on what to follow when you're drawing these characters. And there's another one there about Spider-Man and how to make him consistent with his webbing, the following of the webbing pattern, and that once it goes down his chest, it's flat. They should never be cuts of muscle line, even though it would be correct. It's not correct on this particular way Spider-Man is drawn. And I've seen those little things pop up like, here are the rules, but they were never done on one particular booklet of what rules
Yeah.
to follow. You just received it. Because there was a short time, there was a rule of not using too much yellow on a cover, but it was never written down. It was
No,
just
it
a
was
story that I
you,
heard.
no. You know what it was? Green logos.
Okay.
Stan Lee said to somebody in the 70s that green logos don't sell. So when I'm there in the 90s, Stan Lee hasn't been there for 20 years,
Right.
putting together, pasting up, doing the production on a cover. There's still that thing where you can't make the logo green. And I'd be like, what? What do you mean? It's like green is the best color to work here. No, green logos don't sell. It wasn't until we computerized and they could actually see the different color logos that whole thing went away. It took them to be able to see that a green logo looked best
Mhm.
on a computer screen to make that whole. And I'm sure to Stan Lee it was just a throwaway line. I'm
Probably,
sure
yeah.
he didn't mean no one should do green logos ever.
Mhm.
But when I first started doing productions on covers, we weren't allowed to make the logos green because Stan Lee said green logos aren't good. And it was like, how does that become institutional memory? It was just
Complete. The,
crazy.
the story I heard about was having yellow backgrounds. That Stan did not like yellow background on the
Yeah, I don't know
cover.
about yellow. I never heard that one,
And
but I lived the green logos one.
right. And again, you hear these things over the
Yeah.
years, the whole situation with Iron Man's nose.
Oh yeah.
That particular story or that legend, and again, throwaway line. Doesn't he
Yeah.
have a nose meant, Stark had a nose in the costume. And all of a sudden, Iron Man has a nose.
Well, did you ever hear the story Scott Koblish told about working with Stan Lee at, I think it was Stan Lee Media?
I probably have, but
And he
tell it
loved
again.
working with Stan. He had a good time working with Stan. But he said people would follow his whatever idea he had. People would follow it slavishly. And he'd be like, and so they'd have a meeting, and Stanley'd just be throwing up ideas against the wall. And usually when said Scott had to work with some of this stuff, he'd do whatever came to mind with the idea. But he said other people would follow Stan ideas slavishly. And then in the next meeting, when they showed him this stuff, Stan would be like, oh my God, that's terrible. And they're like, but Stan, that was the idea you told us. And he's like, you're not supposed to follow my bad ideas.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't know that. They just because a lot of people, if Stan said it, that's what they do exactly. But he didn't necessarily want that because he he just throw these ideas out.
That's what you get when some people want to work in comics instead of wanting to work in publishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's
You're
one
not
of those
supposed to
things
follow
where
my bad ideas.
Right. I mean, they're supposed to go, okay, this doesn't work. They're supposed to
Yeah.
tell Stan that idea you had. Do I remember having? Stan would probably say something like, "Do I remember having that idea?" Because if it's throwing 50 ideas at the wall,
Yeah.
pick one.
I was just telling my one of my students this week as I was giving him an assignment to do. She's like, "Well, how many sketches or ideas do you want for it?" I'm like, "Just give me your best one," because I hate what you always have to do when you're doing any kind of like cover idea for an editor or something. They always want to see 3 ideas because they always want choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh. And you always, it's like, I'm like, I don't want you coming up with ideas just to fill out a number because they're not going to be good. Use as many ideas until you get to one you think is a good. And because what always happens is you come up with 3 ideas and the editor picks the one you hate the most, or goes, I like this from this and this from this and that from that. And you somehow got to work all 3 together. And that's just like, it's like, I don't want to do that to you. Because that's nightmarish. King Spoet's in the house. Good evening.
hello.
Yeah, where's Tit Goblin tonight? He's usually the first person here, but he must be actually busy.
Well, when I was at Autosport, the editor would actually be telling the production team over their shoulder how to do the cover. No, but the editor was used to still remember the old days when he would assemble the cover on the cutting board.
Yep.
So
Good
that
evening,
was
Comic Crack.
the thing. He would be writing the cover headlines directly on how the cover was being assembled. So it wasn't really a problem. Because sometimes it's okay. Turn the move the photo 1 inch to the left or something.
Oh, I just had to move some type down a 16th of an inch.
Yeah.
You can do, that's the way it goes.
Newspaper people are used to doing that because they have to do covers with 3 or 4 different pictures, and one has got to be bigger than the other. Then the other one, they have a figure which is standing up, but you actually need it to be flat.
Good
I would
stuff.
say the whole, move it just a nidge down, or a nidge to the left, or a nidge to the right. Can we
End
get
up moving in a
2
circle.
versions of that? And the worst is when you're working with another art director who's like, isn't sure what the client wanted in the first place. And then all of a sudden they start saying, can you bring out this thing? Or I would get a correction and I'll read over the correction and go, we did this already. Are you reading the correct email? Because what you're asking for was done, rejected, and we have a new one. And instead of questioning the client, you were like, no, they sent this, we got to correct it. It's like, are you sure? And we changed it. And then sure enough, it came back. No apologies that he was wrong and I was right. And the pedaling he did came out to be like, we were both wrong and we were both right. It was like, at no point in time was I wrong.
Can't just go, whoops, sorry.
It's like, are you so afraid of just telling the client, wait, you sent this already? Can we revise what you're looking for? And the worst part is, when it's always a project by committee, there is someone on the email chain who wasn't paying attention the whole time. And all of a sudden, at the end of the project, I have something to suggest. It's like you haven't suggested anything for months. Why are you coming in now justifying your job?
Because now it's important.
Yes.
Oh, look, Darren's with us. Good evening, Darren. How are you doing?
Hey.
Welcome.
Hey guys, I'm sorry I'm all fired up because I'm in an argument about AI art on Facebook with someone. So I don't hijack the show while you're
He
talking
comes in
about it.
hot talking about AI art.
Sorry.
I think it's gonna become a regular tool for everybody. I don't know whether.
I'll tell you what got me fired up about it. It's that, and we'll see if this douchebag retorts. I try not to engage in line at all with like political stuff at all or anything like.
You try not to engage in any stuff that'll get you worked up with strangers.
That's right.
That's the way it is.
The issue was this guy seems innocent enough. It sounds like he's a creative writer. He posted about he's like, guys, you know, and this is a forum, like I said, a forum where like I do t-shirt work, right? This is about selling t-shirts on Amazon, stuff about the design and marketing process. And he's talking about, guys, I honestly see, he shows some images he generated, and which are very impressive. And he's like, I honestly see both sides of the argument, but you know, if you're not using it at least to get your creative juices flowing, that's basically what he says. Mm-hmm. You know, you're really missing out. And so I was like, let me get this straight. Were you a artist or designer or photo retoucher before AI, and you just use it? And he's like, and basically his answer is like, no, but I can't do anything at this level. And but like, I've fooled around with, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's a creative writer, so he likes to generate like poetry and stuff. He also likes to generate images to inspire his poetry. I'm like, okay, but then he just it sounds like he just goes ahead and sells the art he's generating with his poetry, right? And my issue was like, would you be cool? Like, I'm shocked as a creative writer that you'd be okay with that. It seems, you know, like, would you be cool with using chat bots to write your poetry, you know, to you know, scrape your poetry, you know, and all that. So he didn't. What I'm saying is he came in with like saying he understood both sides of the argument, yet he has provided no evidence about like the side of the argument.
Well, what it is he doesn't care. He can't.
He doesn't care.
Art he can't make art without.
He doesn't have the ability
AI
to do it.
Art. That's how he makes it. That's how he's gonna make it. It's either sit down and spend 10 years for him to be able to learn art.
That's right.
Or
that's right.
Use the AI art. And for those of us who have spent the 10 years to learn how to make art, it's a little frustrating, but
he even acknowledged that. He's like, I don't want to spend a fortune on designer and illustrator and stuff. I was like, but I said, I do encourage you to reach out to your local design school. Perhaps there's some students, there's people do this for t-shirt design. Perhaps there's some students you could team with who are eager to do some minimally paid work to start building their portfolio and be willing to work with you. So, but these
AI art.
That's right.
That's all it comes down to. It's
that's the thing.
What is going to be? They're going to do what's easiest.
But here's the thing though, is like, you know, he's reaching to defend it. He should just I'm just trying to get him to say it. But I usually don't engage. That being said, I'll switching topics. I'll do a live unboxing of a graphic novel I bought of.
All right. First, let's see what Scott. As an architect, I'm always getting 2D corrections for people who can't think in 3 directions. I can only imagine how much worse it is in architecture. People coming in with corrections and telling you what to do and whatever project you got going on, coming in at the last minute with changes. I can only imagine how much the degree of difficulty in dealing with people in architecture must be higher because there's more people who don't know what they're doing. Now, I think this was nailed it, Jared, was my comment about not getting into arguments with strangers online. That'll just suck up your time and emotion. Good evening, architectural.
Journalists are probably going to end up adopting ChatGPT over the next 2 years because we won't have to spend 2 hours writing a 400-word text.
Yeah, I can see. Well, what it is I heard someone say artists better learn to use AI art, or the English majors will have all the jobs. And I think there's truth to that.
Yes, but not completely.
Not completely, but in order to use ChatGPT, you need to know how to write what you want. So that's what I think it's from what I've noticed online, it's the guys who can write what you need prompts, and you have to know the prompts, and you have to write what you want. You have to be able to exploit the prompts to get back what you want. And it's the guys who can do that who are going to have the advantage.
Fortunately, I work as a copywriter, so maybe, but
like anything else, I see it as a tool. Ooh,
Jim's. Do you guys know Jim Silk?
Yeah, Silke, right?
Yeah, I only discovered him recently because he was in the Dave Stevens circle. I think they shared a studio with him.
Okay.
He was in the Dave Stevens documentary that was recently, and I really like his stuff a lot. It's in that kind of style, nice. This kind of, I don't know if this will read on camera, but this kind of stuff.
Let's give you a solo layout here. Hold on.
Oh,
there we go.
This kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
I really like his style. Can I get in here?
Yeah, I remember liking him. I haven't seen his stuff, and I never knew if it was Jim Silk or Silky.
Yeah, he must have done a lot of. I'm sure he did a lot of commercial work, maybe like movie posters and key art stuff, and then a lot of commercial art stuff. But
my stock phrase is I'll make it as ugly as you want. Oh yeah.
That's right. Did you love the creative projects where they give you feedback and it just keeps getting worse? Every, in your opinion, every version out becomes worse. Sorry, I didn't mean to. This guy is great though, Jim. So I started a folder on I'm sure you guys will have folders on your computers, with different artists and just collecting up art digitally. And so I only discovered him again, like maybe it was in the trailer for that Dave Stevens documentary, which I watched the full thing.
I must know him in conjunction with Dave's. I can't think of where I know his art from specifically, besides comic books, of course.
Right.
But I definitely know his name and his work. Where from? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Was Paulo showing us here?
You do have to know the prompts because you can't just do something generic.
Oh yeah.
I did this, and the prompt was Mona Lisa wearing Daft Punk's helmet, holding an M16.
Oh yeah, and there's all sorts of sub prompts too, where you can. I don't know what they are. I've just read articles about them and seen talking about where you can make stuff bigger and more important in the painting.
Oh, what to accentuate?
Yeah, you can. So, and you have to know all those commands and stuff like that in order to. And I think it was all in Midjourney because I've been watching videos on TikTok about it.
Yeah,
and it's really like.
Yeah, but the AI
I was
still
playing
learning.
with it and getting stuff like that, just whatever comes up. But there are people who know the exact prompts to write and get what they want.
To be honest, I think it's been, and this might sound like wishful thinking. I think it's been cooling off already because originally there was a wave of people like on the social where you see, I'm talking people who are not artists, right? Who are just reusing it and posting stuff, and that it's kind of like trendy. I mean, listen, people have been using like Instagram filters, all kinds of filters to do stuff with their profile pictures for 5-10 years at least, right? And then there's a trend of it, then it goes away. But it's interesting being in the job market. Like, if you're on LinkedIn, between me being like I'm a digital marketer, but I'm like a copywriter, illustrator, designer, and all that. And so you talk about like both copywriting and design, like both of these, or illustration, all these things are threatened right now.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say, and we've talked about this, guys, is like, at least with comics, we know that people like to follow artists. Like I'm a fan of Jared, I'm a fan of Wilson, right? No one's a fan of Paulo, but like, but like people like to say like I collect covers by this artist. And that's also why Jared, we talked about this, why I'm pushing myself to do a combination of traditional and digital.
Right.
So I have no, AI can't replace me doing a pencil rendering on Strathmore paper, right?
They also get one of the things I saw someone talk about too, where the artists have an edge, is people like process videos.
Yes. Absolutely.
They like videos, watching an art sped up, of course, being made. Because watching an artist in real time make a drawing is not very interesting.
Right. No, but that Procreate function.
Oh yeah,
is fantastic, and like
I haven't used that yet. But for those of you who don't know, in Procreate, it can just I think it does it automatically.
It's on, but it's switched on by default, as far as I know. You have to opt it not to do it, but it's great to do it. It's great to watch your own process.
It can just make a video. It keeps track of everything you do and can make a video of it.
Time lapse, right?
You can just go back to the beginning of your drawing and watch yourself draw it. It's like, whoa.
And then you want to edit it so people don't really see that all your all the mistakes you made that you corrected it with, right? Yeah.
Tit Goblin. I forgot what time it was. I forgot what day it was. All right, at the beginning of the show, I said, "Where's Tit Goblin? He's usually the first one here." I can't do it now.
Glad to see you here.
Yeah, I've messed with. Also, if you really want to mess around with AI art, you got to pay for it. It's a subscription. You can only do the low res stuff for free.
Yeah, I remember once I tried to do the same thing for the second time, and out of my 20 attempts now I only had 17. So there's no unless I really want to learn how to draw using Midjourney. I'm not going to have the chance, and 99.9% of the people are not going to spend money on Midjourney. But for you guys who are professional artists, it's probably something that you'll have to consider in the near future.
Yeah. It definitely has to be dealt with.
And I'm not really worried on the copyright issue because especially because you guys come from a tradition of tracing. And let's remember that Jack Kirby created the Etrigan the Demon by tracing over an old Prince Valiant strip.
Yeah, I think with copywriting, no one goes into copywriting. No one goes, no 15-year-old goes, I know what I want to do, advertising copywriting. Mm-hmm. You kind of fall into it.
Like I have.
And then I think Chat GPT can make your job easier. I don't think anyone's going to go, no 18-year-old is going to go, I'm going to master Chat GPT copywriting and take away jobs from all the copywriters. I don't think that's reality. And maybe an editor or somebody who hires copywriters will go, instead of having a copywriter for this little job, I'm just going to use Chat GPT. I think that's going to be the worst of it. Because no person who hires copywriters wants to give themselves more work copywriting. Mm-hmm. Well, they have their new job, so they don't have to copyright. So I think that's going to be different than artists.
Mm-hmm. And if any, what I'm wondering is for example, in Chat GPT, if I can just give that thing a bullet list, but even but it also has its own prompts. So in that respect, it is like Midjourney, and I would have to give it prompts that it would recognize not only the bullet list of what I want to write, but also in what specific order,
right?
And how long to talk about a specific subject.
I've seen TikToks about people showing what ChatGPT can do, and it's crazy. It's like, tell ChatGPT I need a bullet list of 6 ideas for such and such. Okay, go into more detail in bullet point 3. Okay, do that only, and it's just like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it cobbles together information, but
it helps you organize.
It can help you organize and come up with ideas and just all sorts of nutty stuff. Like I actually use Chat GPT sort of messing around like in my class when sometimes we need copy because I'm teaching the kids how to typeset, and it's easier to typeset on actual copy than it is on
Lorem Ipsum
placeholder text.
Yeah.
So you can just tell it to write back cover copy for The Great Gatsby, and it'll write you 500 words back cover copy in The Great Gatsby in an instant. And for that, it's good because it's meaningless in terms of it looks good on a kid's project or something. But that's like the what I use it for, the simplest thing.
Well, fortunately for me, the stuff I do, the copy I'm usually hired to do, like the gigs I get, is it's called short form, which is like taglines and maybe a product description that has like some punchy language in it, that kind of stuff. I have done long form with kind of stuff, and I highly prefer doing short form because I just kind of like knocking it out and that's it rather than. But I have done stuff like have done like alumni, like for alumni magazine, I've done like these interviews with alumni. AI can't do that. It's
right,
like, and like do an interview with them, piece it together and shape it into like a profile interview kind of thing. Most of what I do is short form. What AI can't do, I mean, it could generate ideas. I guess what I can't do is like create campaigns that are meaningful, like, we're getting into the psychology of the buyer and all that stuff, but maybe, I don't completely dismiss it for that. But.
I had AI write me the first chapter of a Great Gatsby versus Dracula story. Just to see if it could do it. It did a decent job. I mean, it wasn't great writing, but it was at least as good as some of the I in my Gatsby stuff, since Gatsby is in the public domain now, someone put out a book of the Great Gatsby from Daisy's point of view. Found it on Amazon, downloaded a sample, read the first 2 chapters, and I got to say the Chat GPI was at least as good as this mediocre writing that this, I assume, human person did. I'm not telling you the Chat GPI was great writing, but it was decent, mediocre writing.
Decent, mediocre writing.
How can I make my life easier without being able to think about the long-term consequences? Yeah. The encroachment of artificial intelligence in every aspect of life is inevitable unless people educate themselves. Well, they're not going to educate themselves. So,
yeah.
On the potential to fundamentally alter what we now constitute.
Yeah.
These stories about like people like torturing AI. It's crazy.
I'm not a tree hugger when it comes to like advancement in like technology and listen, it's an age-old story. Livelihoods are being threatened by new technology that comes in and stuff like that. But it's going to be interesting to see with this lawsuit that's come about and some other challenges to what it's actually doing, how the AI is being trained. The question is just like, it's like so hard to like, identify where, pull things from. But guess what? The people who program the AI know where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, it's like they know what they did to feed it, right?
Yep.
So could I take an AI generated image and like do a reverse search and somehow figure out, it took this from this, unless it's so blatantly obvious? No. Okay. Yeah. But the people program it know what it's doing.
They just took away a copyright from an AI comic book.
Oh, really?
Someone made a AI comic book. I forget its name. I saw this like a week or 2 ago. Registered it with the trademark office or whatever. They gave them the trademark on it. Then like a month later, they rescinded the trademark.
Good.
Because nobody's sure about trademark status of AI art.
It's new territory with
right.
God. There was, when the internet came along, it really heated up like in the late 90s during like the first boom era. When there was the rush for everyone to get domain names. I owned Aaron Kane, obviously. You owned Jared Osborne, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I got my name back in like 99, I think, and I'm glad I got it. I didn't do anything with it for a long time, but there was, the reactive laws that came into existence was cyber squatting. Have you heard that term?
Right.
Like, so someone I think owned Madonna.com with no one, I think if you demonstrate intent to actually do something, like make it a fan site or something, but if you were just basically squatting just to hold it hostage, just to get money out of, whoever. I think someone bought, not Star Wars. I think it was something in the Star Wars sphere. Someone might have like registered like Jar Jar Binks or something back in like '98, a year ahead of that movie. But you know, it's like I don't think the government is typically ahead of technology in terms of what.
No, the law.
it
more
never
reactive,
is. The
right?
Well, it's
last
never
thing.
had technology.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest one was the lawsuit between the Nissan Motor Company and Nissan Computers over the rights to Nissan.com. And there was a period of 5 years where they both agreed that neither would use the trademark and that the Nissan.com would just tell you to go to the respective websites. Because Nissan Computers was a real computer sales service in Israel, which predated the international use of the Nissan brand for cars, because Nissan Motor Company sold their cars outside Japan as Datsuns, and Nissan Computers was already Nissan while Datsun was still a thing.
Huh. Well, let's talk about a comic book for a moment.
Yeah,
One of the new ones I got this week, which I just read just before the show, is another one of these aftershock graphic novels. The foulness in the walls.
Is this thing oversized? Is this thing like magazine size?
Yes, this is Marvel graphic novel sized.
Mm-hmm.
They've been putting out a bunch of these over the last couple of years. I'm surprised they're in bankruptcy, but still putting out comics too.
That was my next question about their financial status right now.
This is like the 10th or 15th one of these I've gotten from them over the last 2 years. They're $8. This one is, I think it's around 40 or 44 pages. So it's like, you know, it's the cost of 2 comics and the pages of 2 comics. And each one is sort of its own individual thing. Except for they've had a couple of like series in this format. And I just started buying them like as a matter of course, just because I've always said I wanted more like European graphic album stuff in here, over here. So I was like, you know what, I may as well buy because you don't have to decide if you're going to buy another issue, because usually they're done in ones, and they vary in quality, but they're generally okay. And this one I really enjoyed, but I'm having a hard time judging it because it's either too long or too short. Because from one point of view, it's an 8-page story crammed into a 40-page book. From another point of view, it's an 80-page story crammed into a 40-page book. Because it's a horror story. I'll read you the back. After a tragic loss, George hopes to rebuild his life. He moves to a new house. He gets a new job. He starts dating the girl of his dreams. Sometimes, though, guilt can be as malevolent as an evil spirit. Sometimes ghosts follow you. Something is rotting in the walls of George's new house. Something hungry. But what it is, like I said, I can see this done as an 8-page story. I can see it done as a 120-page story. Because the basic story is we got this, and the art is nice. The art is by Rodrigo Zayas, who's Spanish, I think it says. Born in Madrid, Spain.
I like the cover.
Yeah. The artwork in general is pretty good. Let me go solo so I can show you guys this. There's that page. There he is using a bug bomb or something. But it's got this sort of nice, realistic slice of life drawing to it. And that's the part I like about. I like the slice of life part. That's what it is. It's it's like an 8-page horror story with 32 pages of slice of life in it. And I like slice of life stuff, so I really enjoyed it. But if you're a horror fan, you might not like it as much, because the story starts with him. There's only like in the very beginning, we find out his mother has just died after a long illness where he was taking care of his mother. And taking care of his mother cost him everything. Financially and I think emotionally too. It's hard to really tell because I don't go into it a whole lot. But at one point, his buddy's like, you didn't have to do all that. And he's like, well, I had to. She's my mother. So you get the feeling that she wasn't a very good mother. And he paid some sort of price for it. So he decides to buy this house in an area that looks like Detroit. Have you ever seen pictures of Detroit where there's rundown houses everywhere?
There's blocks and blocks of like.
Right. He looks like he bought this house in that sort of place. And it's run down like those houses are. And his buddy's like, you're moving in here? He's like, yeah, it's the only thing I can afford. He's like, you could have rented. He's like, then I'd have nothing. So the story's just he moves into the house. He eventually gets a new job at like a local supermarket or something. He's looking to start over and do anything. Gets a job at the local supermarket. This co-worker takes a shine to him and she asks him out. And this takes place all over the 40 pages. But meanwhile, when he goes home at night, there's this smell in his house, this stench that he can't figure out where it's coming from. So you got this slice of life story with him starting off. And you've got this story about him fighting this smell in his house. He's using air freshener. He's using car air fresheners hanging on that. This smell is not going away. So finally, he figures out it's behind this wall. So of course, what does he do? He eventually knocks down this wall. There's nothing there but a giant hole that he's talking to, this big black hole, which you start to get the feeling is some sort of guilt for his mother. Why there's guilt for his mother, you don't know, because it really didn't go that much into his relationship with his mother. So eventually, during all this slice of life stuff, he ends up, like he's got his one friend who's looking out for him. He kills his one friend and throws him into the hole to try and feed this monster, which went away for some. That's right. There was some point where he yelled at the monster behind the wall to go away, and it did. And then he was guilty that the monster went away. And it was like, I liked it. I liked the slice of life stuff, but the horror stuff was 8 pages. So it's a tough one to judge.
I have a business question. It's probably a bigger conversation. I have a business question about like this project. So did you hear about this at all before you bought it, or you just saw it on a whim?
No, I'm just buying these blind.
Okay, so
I always say, if a comic appeals to me, you're in trouble, business-wise.
That's right. So, what if you could speculate? We will.
Yep.
What was the print run? How many of these did they sell? A couple of thousand?
Well, first of all, I think it's return. At least other ones have been returnable. That's why I first started buying these, because my comic shop would have 10 of them on the shelf, and I'd be like, 10 of them. They don't have 10 of Spider-Man on the shelf.
Right? Yeah. Unless they just sent them. If you sell it,
but he said that at one point he told me they were returnable, so you may as well order 10.
There was no risk, yeah. So that kind of throws a curveball in, but it's like it's this kind of thing. Like I try to because I'm fascinated with the business of comics and back engineer it.
I can't imagine they sell any more than 5,000 of these.
That might be generous. I mean, it's just
you're right. That might be generous.
Yeah, it's like, but this project, we talked about this maybe a little bit. This creative team, is it?
Yep.
Let's say the writer this was his idea, and there's a creative brings together.
Colin Bunn is the one who's gonna sell. He's a pretty big name, writer-wise in mainstream comics.
And that's why I always get into the question why would anyone go anywhere else but Image or Creative owned stuff? Which is, I understand that's a naive question, because it's you might have a relationship with other publisher that might actually give you more.
Dave Sharp is the letterer. You'd go for the page rate. Mm-hmm. Let me see who this.
Well, it's creative control, and then skin in the game for licensing rights for for option, that kind of stuff.
This is copyright Colin Bunn and Aftershock Comics. The artist doesn't even have copyright. So the artist did this for the page rate.
That's right. That's right. So
He's got
it's
no
like
scheme.
it depends, like, as how desperately you want to be published, or like, how much do you give up, in exchange for being published, or it's a passion project, you just really want to get it out there. There are lots of reasons why you make the deal that you do.
Well, I think the writer takes very little risk.
Because it's the quickest part of the process.
Yeah, because it's fast. The writer, he could write this in a day.
Yeah.
2 days, let's say. Let's say he came up with because I have to imagine, if you're a writer, you're coming up with ideas all the time. You've got a notebook full of ideas for stories.
Hey, maybe some people have like
Yeah, I imagine like someone like Colin Bunn must. He's got a notebook full of ideas. So the time it takes him to come up with the ideas doesn't even count, because he has to do that all the time, no matter what. Yeah. That doesn't count on any individual. And then when he actually sits down to write it, I imagine he can write the first script draft for a 40-page comic in a day.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And it's going to take the artist a month to draw. So he's got to get a page rate, and even then, he's probably not getting a high page rate. He's got to get whatever he can. So I think that the writer takes much, much less risk in a passion project, so they can, they can do it. Mm-hmm. Not only are they the one, like Colin Bunn's name is what's going to sell this. Not only is there that, it's that he's the owner on it in case it becomes something.
Does he have stuff at other publishers? I would guess yes, but like,
he's a Marvel and DC writer, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember what he's done, but for years I know he did stuff that I never read, because it was mainstream stuff.
So why now? Of all publishers, and this is nothing against Aftershock, but like, why is this parked at Aftershock versus Dark Horse versus everyone else?
I'm guessing because who's at Aftershock? Besides Mike Martz, who used to be there, who everybody knows. Mm-hmm. Who was the guy? Who's the artist who was doing everything? Joe Pruitt. Joe Pruitt was an Aftershock guy. So, I forget what he did. He's been a comic artist for a long time, and I think he's the one who recruited Mike Martz to this. So I imagine he knows all these guys.
Didn't Joe Pruitt own something called Desperado Publishing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not new. I forget what he's done, but he's not new to comics and publishing.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I had. There's something called Kilroy's here. I bought it years ago.
That's all. Let's see what Architectural Foam Panels has been saying. The internet has already fundamentally altered human cognitive faculties. Something as simple as a brain's ability to retain information, even more pronounced in young generations. I keep hearing that, but I haven't seen it yet. I have to some extent. I've got some students who can't stay off their phones. They just can't. It's crazy to me. I'm no Luddite, but I've hugged my fair share of trees. Yeah. At this stage, AI is a novelty, a toy. Yeah, but when we're completely dependent on it as a society, we're perpetually accommodating ourselves to our own subjugation and domination. But yeah, comics.
People are already dependent on cheese.
Definitely.
Since they invented cheese, the society has gone downhill ever since.
Magneto, he's read. So he's definitely done some Marvel. Like I said, I knew his name before I ever read any of his stuff, which meant I think he was a pretty big name at Marvel or DC. That's how I got to know his name, but I never read any of it because I didn't read any Marvel or DC.
But you're aware of his name, yeah.
I don't think I enjoyed that he did.
I probably enjoyed this more than your average Aftershock graphic novel, but it's still kind of flood. It's still funny. Like I said, it's either 32 pages too long or 60 pages too short.
But your statement earlier basically is strongly suggesting that if something appeals to you, you're not a good barometer of what will sells in the,
right.
in the market. Okay.
My taste is so not mainstream taste that, matter of fact, I used to say this to like Carl at Bad Idea when he'd go, "How did you like the comic?" I'm like, "Oh, I really liked it," which is probably bad for you guys because that means it
doesn't bode well. Doesn't
I was
bode
like,
well.
my taste is just not mainstream, so I know when something appeals to me, it's probably not going to appeal to the masses.
It's in stand-up comedy, there's the term like playing the back of the rooms, that or being a comic, which is the same with an artist. Like, that, there's a certain smaller percentage that totally gets you and really likes your stuff, but like the general, it's like beyond the general audience. It's like they have too low denominator of a taste, maybe, or that kind of thing. But regarding technology, just real quickly to go back to the comment before, it's like I remember reading not too long ago a comment, maybe it was on a YouTube video, it might have been like something about the 80s, right? But the comment I thought was pretty astute was like, one great things about the 80s was technology was getting good, but not intrusive yet. It was like that middle, right. Like, you said we had VCRs, we had Walkmans, but it was then though pre-internet and mobile devices, though. I think the internet has been incredibly valuable for human progression.
Oh, of course.
Obviously.
As Scott, I love Mystery Man and Freddy Got Fingered. His taste isn't mainstream either.
Right.
Of course not. You just made a G.G. Allen graphic novel. That's definitely not mainstream.
I just remember Cullen Bunn was here in Portugal, 5 years ago? I think it was the Portuguese release of Harrow County.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. He did Harrow County. That was a pretty big indie he did. I remember everyone buying that.
But I didn't buy it. I wasn't really interested.
Yeah. I see it each semester with my students, sharp decline in their ability to focus, remember, just even to pretend that they want to be in a physical space as opposed to on the other side of the screen. Right. I definitely agree with that second sentence there. They don't want to be there. And it's like, and I'm teaching art to art students. And so in some classes, you can tell when they want to be there, and you can tell when they and when they don't want to be there. And the hardest part I find about teaching art is that you can't teach creativity to some students. Mm-hmm. They can do what you tell them, but I like to give students an opportunity to be creative. And some take it and run with it. And some can follow the steps you give them, and that's it. And I'm like, no, this is your opportunity to be creative, but they don't want to. They'd rather
as long as they know they're allowed to and encouraged to be so, because maybe they, who knows if they have something in their head where they feel like if they veer off of like they go
back to their. I tell them, I'm like, no, this is when you're supposed to come, and they can't. They go back to their phone. They do whatever has to be done, and then go back to their phone. And it's like,
different generation.
I mean, I imagine they couldn't be creative without the phone. They'd just go back to staring at the wall if there was no phone. But I don't blame the phone necessarily. It's just not everybody's that creative.
There are memes where there are memes made for Zillennials. When I was your age, we played with sticks and pretended they were dolls. So. I think of course it's exaggerating, but yeah.
There's that famous picture of everybody in the New York subway with a newspaper in front of their face, saying something like, "Yeah, before we were glued to our phones, we used to always interact." And everybody in the entire subway car has got a newspaper in their face.
But it's different. Now when I was at my old boss's funeral a couple of weeks ago, and then we went to a place where we knocked back some whiskeys, and the conversation that we had was different than the conversation we're having here, just for the mere fact that we are sharing the physical space, the way we look at each other, the body language, the place we take in the room, how we're sitting down, it's natural in the way we're talking here isn't. None of us are sharing a physical space, so the way we are looking at each other is always unnatural.
Right.
and it's much more. Even I, who like spending hours on a computer, feel that I feel much more comfortable in a natural setting having a conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm not exactly sure why the new generations are afraid of it, uh, because our brains are hardwired for being in the presence of other humans, in the actual presence.
I think it matters on the people. Like art students, I think are naturally a little
More
I think there's a
introverted.
lot of introverted artists.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of personality trait will lend them not to want to be in a room with people. I don't know about the general population though. I don't know how introverted the general population is. But I think introverts would rather be at home with a screen. But like I said, I don't know how much of the population would be introverts. But I think that would like encourage their introvertedness.
Especially because the way I see the problem is not that they're introverts. Introverts can be creative.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying how they when you're talking about them wanting to be in a physical space with someone or not.
I remember some discussion I saw online a few years ago. Somebody was a guy complaining that he tried to get his kid into comics, and the kid only wanted them in digital. Okay, so here's digital comics, and because there were 5,000 comics that he could download at the same time, he didn't really put in an effort on them because he could get anything at any time. And that's kind of the generation we have. Okay, do you want to watch something? Sure, let me put it on Netflix. There it is. And so we're not really fighting for access to information, and that leads to not being interested in nothing, because nothing's worth the effort to be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
It also ends up curtailing our natural curiosity.
You can't teach curiosity, creativity, or curiosity. Yeah, that's tough. Technology is the practical application of knowledge, but it's a matter of looking past the immediate benefits of the short-term potential long. Yeah, but I don't think technology is just not depends. Technology is not just a practical application for knowledge for the people using the technology. Kind of, it's like for the average person using technology like a car, they don't know how a car works. They just know get you from point A to point B faster than walking.
Sure.
So I think technology being a practical application of knowledge is true of knowledgeable people. I don't know if it's true of everyone. A newspaper is finite, though. A smartphone is a portal into everything. Yep. Agreed, Paulo. Young generation's brains are being hardwired in the opposite direction, though. There are fewer risks and greater rewards in a disembodied space like the internet. I can remember, too, when one of the things that like video games are really good at is, and I think, giving somebody a sense of accomplishment. I can remember, because I played video games in my youth up through my 20s. I probably played video games, I don't know, until the 90s. My friends and I would play. Then I just kind of stopped. But what it was first of all, when you finish a game, you think you've accomplished something. Because the game makes you feel like you accomplished something. But you really haven't accomplished anything. You just played a game until the end. And I can remember thinking to myself once.
Well, same could be said for Rubik's Cube, though that does exercise the brain a bit. But
yeah,
you can really show another person, I finished a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, no one thinks they accomplished anything with solving a Rubik. No one says, ooh, no one brags to you that they finished a Rubik's Cube. Right. People brag to you, at least they used to, that they finished a video game.
Oh, okay, I see that. Yeah.
And I can remember saying to myself, I was playing early 2000s. I was playing like John Madden football or something, and John Madden football. I used to play it all through the 90s, but it got to the point where I was better at football in real life than I was at the video game football, because the video game football had just gotten more complicated and more nuanced, but it was in no way related to playing football. In that, in real life, I could make the throws I needed to make. I couldn't make them on the video game, which is the complete opposite of how video games usually are.
Right, it's supposed to be for people who can.
Right.
Were you playing
better at whatever it is in the video game? But and I said to myself, you know what I should do? I should take some time and really learn these controls and figure out how exactly to make these throw. And then I said to myself, why would I do that? I'm like, it's like I would have to put in 40 hours to master, maybe at least to master the controls, to be able to throw as well as I can in real life. And what will I get out of it? I will get being able to play this video game better. And I'm like, that's not really an accomplishment.
Well,
just never played it again.
It depends if the entertainment values,
right. But at that point, there was no entertainment value,
right.
too. That's what I'm saying.
By the way, it sounds like you started playing it with Sega Genesis than PlayStation. That's what I figured that's the progression.
By the time like the Xboxes rolled around, it was a completely different thing.
They are pretty phenomenal, though, in terms of the.
Oh yeah, they're really. But it's like even nowadays, I got to the point where I like to play a video game for 10 minutes and put it down. If I can't play it for 10 minutes and put it down, I don't want to play it, because that's the kind of video game I want these days. I don't want to be immersed in a game for 3 hours and all of a sudden it be midnight. That's just not what I'm looking for anymore.
There was a trailer released the other day for the upcoming movie about the origin of the licensing of Tetris. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't want to steer too far off of comics, but that's good that you mentioned that. Like, but what I'm saying is when you mention games you get in and out in 10 minutes, that would be the ideal kind of like, that, or a game of, Pac-Man, or, just like the simple stuff that,
I'll show you another terrific comic this week. New issue of Parker Girls by Terry Moore.
Who's the artist in that?
Terry Moore.
Terry, he does both, right? He writes in.
Yeah, he writes and draws it.
It's from a distance. It looks like kind of like Milo.
Manara?
Yeah, a little bit.
That same single weight style kind of thing.
Maybe it's more like. It's clean, nice, clean art. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Moore used to be more cartoony back in the early volumes of Strangers in Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And
but I don't think he's doing Manara. I think he seems to be aping Greg Land, but with actual drawing.
Oh, is that it? I know.
That could be. You're right. It's the hair. He doesn't usually draw hair like that.
That's right.
That big flowing hair.
But the coloring reminds me a little bit of Mobius in terms of like the pastel.
Yeah, he doesn't color it. I forget. He's got a colorist doing these colors. But I think it's the hair. The hair is Greg Landish, and the coloring is Greg Landish. That's what it is. Because I'm used to seeing his work in black and white too, because it's not color on the inside. But I read somebody on Twitter say, "In this was the best." What do they call it? The best forensic scientist scene they've seen in a comic. And it was just these two characters trying to figure out what happened at a murder scene. And it was like, months after the murder scene. So they just went in and tried to figure out how the woman they know died. So they're looking at all the stuff. What made this sound? It was just so well done, them figuring it out.
I'm laughing at the comment.
Greg Land is a national treasure. Language is technically a technology. It sure
you know
is.
what, Gil? I really like the stuff, but then you really got to see the obscene photo reference, of even pornography and stuff, which is okay, but like in terms of facial expression.
The operative term is of theory of specialization. I don't need to know how to repair or even build a car to use one. But the long-term effects of that dependency on a tech that exports tons of cars. Oh, yeah. I didn't think that's what you were talking about when you, where was it? The practical application of technology is just, I didn't think that's, I see what you're talking about now, but I didn't think that's what we were talking about with that sentence. So.
It could be someone else's knowledge, not necessarily your own, right?
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Because, I'm just saying, people with not a lot of knowledge use technology thoughtlessly. So,
Well, that's why I'm always astonished that anti-science. We give an iPhone in your hand. I'm like,
yeah.
An example of how language is a technology.
yeah.
The thing that you refer to as mackerel actually refers to two completely different types of fish that are so unrelated that it's the same thing as using the same words for giraffe and deer.
I don't know much about fish, so I don't know that.
But
I got
you have
some
to know
books
exactly
this
what that fish is, because your life may depend on it.
By the way, my favorite Greg, I don't have much Greg Land stuff, but his cross-gen stuff on Sojourn, I like. Other than that, I haven't paid much attention.
That was his earlier stuff, right?
I think so.
It wasn't that early. Procedural comics are hard to do well, but when well done, high art. Yeah, great procedural in this, just of them figuring out exactly how this woman died. So, like I said, Terry Moore's good. He's good. But I always find it funny. He's well, I think I talked about this last week when I was suspicious of him being a nice guy on YouTube.
Procedural as in investigation.
Yes, they were investigating why this girl died. Like, to me, Terry Moore is such a genius cartoonist, comic book artist that he should be nuttier.
He should be more eccentric.
He should be that cliched, nutty genius, but no, he's just a normal guy.
The detective stuff reminded me of it. I've never read. I probably have an issue or two because it's the start of Adam Hughes' Maze Agency. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's probably like tongue in cheek kind of gumshoe PI stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually. I probably have an issue or two again because it's like Hughes before he was even on Justice League. But right. I'm trying to think. Don't make me mention Dakota North. I have no idea how procedural that was. If you know what I'm talking about.
Dakota North?
It was a short-lived series in '86.
I remember that one. I remember it being mediocre.
Marvel.
Yeah.
You got out 5 issues of it.
Yeah. I wanted it to be better because it wasn't a superhero comic. And that's what I was, of course, into at the time.
It was
I love the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great name.
I love the logo.
So it looked it was going to be a really good thing, and I remember nothing of it. But I got them. I bought them.
Zero.
Oh, I bought them new. I think it was bi-monthly. They got out 5 issues.
I bought them as they came out.
Yeah, I had a really nice house ad. I think the idea was
it looked nice.
I think in the scene he was trying to do a serious story, and Tony Salmons drew it like it was supposed to be a joke.
Ah.
It was supposed to be kind of like a fashion PI kind of thing, right?
But like I said, I say, being that I can't remember anything about it, but being disappointed by it, that means my opinion on it is expired. I'd actually have to read it again to have an opinion on it.
If you think about the time that came out, if you think about the time that came out in '86, right? And it's
right.
I guess it would have made sense, I guess, if it was an epic book and not like Marvel Universe proper. I have no idea if she crossed over at the time.
Who wrote
until
it?
And Nocenti.
Nocenti.
Okay. Mate,
I don't read comics. I just look at the pretty picture.
Me too. Dakota North,
but there are no. From what I've read, I haven't read this series, but I've tried to find out exactly what it was about. It from there's a website called what's its name?
I love Dakota North. #1 Dakota North fan. Is that what the website?
Yeah, there's a website called The Appendix to the Handbook of the Marvel Universe, and
and
a lot of the modern handbooks, they use profiles from this website because they have profiles for characters that either did not appear on the original handbooks or they had very small entries. And there are entries for Dakota North and all of the characters. And indeed, it looks like that in the original series, there's no reference whatsoever to the Marvel Universe. So, yeah you're right. And Sandy could have kept the idea for herself. It just could have done an epic book.
Weird. Which reminds me that I saw on Wilson's TikTok that he got the handbook to the G.I. Joe universe. What's the name of that? There we go.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe Order of Battle.
And Rocky Balboa's in there, right?
Yes, yes. So what happened was I was talking to my brother about the story about, before we had the internet, we didn't really know characters and stuff like that. Now, the G.I. Joe toys came with information on the back that Larry Hama wrote, and then they would be the handbooks. You have the handbooks in the Marvel Universe. There's a Conan handbook of the Conan universe. There's a Transformer one, and those are the ones done by Marvel. DC Comics did their Who's Who. And so I had picked them all up because at that time, it was the only way to get information about the characters. And I remember clearly in high school or junior high about everyone trying to grab the handbook of the Marvel Universe because it was so jam-packed with information. But there was so much disinformation going on as well, because someone would read a line and think that was gospel to the book. It was like, no, it was just a suggestion that this character may have done this or that. And so when the G.I. Joe ones came out, the information that was in the G.I. Joe books were out before some of the events happened in the comics. And the conversation I was having with my brother is that I wonder what was the deal to make someone like Sergeant Slaughter a member of the G.I. Joe team, because Sergeant Slaughter was there. So was this just a movie tie-in or what have you? And then in this discussion, it was like, did you know, because as it always starts up, did you know that Rocky Balboa was supposed to be a member of G.I. Joe? And he's like, no, he hasn't heard that. And it's like, well, I have something to show you. So I digged out the books. I couldn't find them. So I ended up going online. It's like, oh, here's a whole set of them on eBay for like $4 or something like that. I don't think I spent more than $20 for all 4 of these books. In really good condition too. And the thing that I remembered is that because it's in the first issue, and we did not see a toy, and it didn't appear in the comic book yet. So it went through the whole school. Did you hear Rocky? Rocky's going to be a G.I. Joe member. It's like, you're lying. How do we know that? And sure enough, actually, I think it might be the second book. Let me just double check. I really should have put it under in order. It's in the second issue.
That's just what he's showing us right now. Rocky in the G.I. Joe handbook.
So
which was the hot gossip at his
it was the hot gossip. It was like, this was information that we knew because it didn't happen in the comic book yet. There was only rumor about Sergeant Slaughter, and that's all the guys who knew wrestling. I wasn't a wrestling fan, but I knew of it because wrestling in the 80s was so huge, you could not know about it. It was just
so
there.
Sergeant Slaughter even appeared in the handbook before the comic book, and
so he's in the handbook. I don't know if he appeared before the comic book. I haven't gone into the deep dive into see what was his first issue, or because I don't recall Sergeant Slaughter being there until the movie. I don't know when this published compared to the movie. I'm still doing all that research. But a few pages before Sergeant Slaughter, we have Rocky Balboa. So his code name is Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
And what they usually did with the live with real characters in G.I. Joe, the G.I. Joe universe, they were usually trainers. So they weren't going out and fighting Cobra themselves. You know, the real characters stood in the bunker and basically were teaching what to do, because G.I. Joe they're the best of whatever their section is. So at some point, someone had the idea to put Rocky in. I like that he has. He also has a little bit of Rambo going on there because he has a bandana. And he's in there, and there is, a bio for him and what happens. So this is issue 2 where he appears. So issue 1 and 2 are just the Joes. Issue 3 are Cobra, and issue 4 are the vehicles and weapons. So we were all excited until issue
Who
3
drew the
came.
vehicles and weapons? Was it Elliot Brown?
I don't know. I didn't get to check on that. I would not be surprised if it was Elliot because he usually was the one to do those.
Yeah.
Elliot Brown. He wrote and the artist on this.
Oh, look at that.
He was the main artist on this particular book, but he was really good at doing that. So this is the first time I've ever seen in a comic book a retraction.
Ah.
So by issue 3, there's a retraction that says the character of Rocky Balboa, codenamed Rocky, was incorrectly included as a member of G.I. Joe. He is not now, nor has he ever been a member of G.I. Joe. So that retraction is both in issue 3 and issue 4 of the handbook. Now, one other live action or real life person that was a member of G.I. Joe was the football player William the Refrigerator Perry. His code name was the Fridge. And his went as far as being made into an action figure, and that was a mail away figure. So you had real life people in G.I. Joe, but again, to get to the point of Rocky being drawn and made up to the point where like it went to press,
It must have been a done deal.
I would guess that it's a done deal. I haven't gone further into the deep dive only because there's only so much you can find out.
Right.
What I do know, just because of the recent Rocky movies and Creed, is that Sylvester Stallone does not himself own the Rocky story.
Right.
Or the movies. So he may not have had the merchandising rights to a set. So they probably went just to the point of getting ready to make a toy to find out, oh, we can't. And the only thing that it went far enough to be printed must meant that it was right there. Everything must have been signed up to a point where someone must have said, hold on a second. And to me, it was just amazing because as I was telling my brother this tale, and it's like, did I remember it correctly? Did he become, or was it a rumor? And it's like, I know I read the profile. So I went, picked up the books, and it's like, there it is. It was there. Since these, as far as I'm aware of, did not have any reprints, I don't know if the reprints would even have a minute. So it was one of those things where it was like, here's a nice, cool thing to look into to check out how, we almost had Rocky as an action figure and as a member of G.I. Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the handbooks of the Marvel Universes, the handbook books altogether.
I think it was Martha Thomas's, not Nascenti. Is that our Dakota North writer?
Might be. I had the idea that it was Nascenti. Nascenti did long shot. Martha Thomas's might have been.
Whoever Martha Thomas
apart from this, not much, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that name at all. I'm always surprised by his books and try to watch Terry Moore's channel, but him and his wife are too normal in real life. Exactly. It's like visiting Hank and Peggy Hill from King of the Hill. Me too. I'm like, And he is such a cartoonist too. And what I mean by that is he's not what happens with a lot of comic book artists is they're so narrow in their scope that they don't always try new things. And he's had something going on his channel now where he's been trying to find his favorite ink, this Pelican ink that they don't make anymore. And I've seen artists like that. And I'm always like, I've had favorite inks over the years, but they stop making it. I go find a new favorite ink. I'm always trying out new inks. I'm always looking for a new thing because that's my curiosity as an artist and sort of the breadth of my scope isn't as narrow as, Terry Moore's doing that comic every month. That's why he's so good at it. But I find that funny because he's been doing the same thing for so long. And this happens to a lot of cartoonists. They don't know anything outside of that same thing. That's how normal he is. And even like he doesn't even. He's like he doesn't want to find a new ink. He wants the ink that he's always used. So it's like I can understand that, but to me, it's like ink is I use whatever ink I got, but I don't have that narrow focus, which
Yeah, I
serves
get what
him
you
well.
mean. It's
I'm,
like
I'm
sometimes
glad he's got it because I like
you're
this
used
comic.
you're so used to using that same tool that you want to
Yeah,
use it.
and a
I
lot
know
of
that.
cartoonists are like that.
Yeah, and I completely get it. I remember I
Yeah.
even Stan, when I was working conventions, and we would be ordering supplies, Stan had a particular pen that he liked to sign comic books with, and would
Ah.
always get that pen. I have it written down somewhere, but it was one of those things where it was like, even before he switched over to Sharpies, there was a particular pen, because he was signing the inside of the books. On the first page in the books is where it was common to sign books.
Yeah,
all
but
the
you
way
didn't
in the
sign on the
90s,
cover.
right, all the way up to slabbing purposes. Once
Yeah.
the books were getting slabbed, it switched over the covers. But he had a particular one he liked, doing his autograph on. But again, it's one of those things where it's like I do recall Pelican being one of the inks recommended to me as I was starting out as an inker. But the inker that was teaching me, Harry Candelero, he was telling me about mixing inks and try to make it a little more darker, and doing some drops of ammonia and things like that where we're changing. And I got to the point where it's like I was mixing a few different types of inks, and my favorite, just out of the jar and not mixing, was for a long time FW ink.
Okay.
I enjoyed that, and I didn't have to do anything to it. But you kind of like, you find what you like, and then you go from there. But there have been so many times where things will change, where it's like, why isn't this working the same?
My favorite,
the formula changed.
Right, my favorite ink in the '90s was Higgins T100. They stopped making that because it was drafting film ink. It was called.
Mm-hmm.
It was a matte black ink, and it was made for inking on plastic drafting film, which of course no one does anymore. I mean, there was T100 years after there was no drafting film anymore, but eventually they stopped making it. But it's like I'll adapt to any new ink kind of thing. But some people, they got that laser focus on how they do things, and
it makes sense, in that one aspect of they don't have to think about it. They know they can open the jar and just start working.
Exactly how it's going to react. Those Marvel handbooks are great. Have the Transformers ones too. Yeah, didn't you? Yep, that had Rocky in it. We saw Sykes. The Fridge is a Clemson classmate of mine, and I've met him once when he was a freshman. Wow, look at that.
Cool.
But the ink I've been using the last couple of years, there's this French ink I like, Sennelier, but it's an acrylic ink, so it's like a paint. So sometimes that stuff can get real thick on you just after you lay it down, but I still like it. I haven't used it in a while. I've been using Dick Blick Black Cat ink. But what I have to do with it, what happened was, first I got this, let me show you here. I got this big quart bottle of Blick Black Cat ink. And the first quart bottle I used some out of the bottle, and I didn't really like it. It was a little too gray for me. And I used a bit of it. I used it. I didn't like it. And then it sat there for 6 months. And after 6 months, a little bit of it evaporated, and it was better. I'm like, ooh, I like this now. Mm-hmm. So now what I do is I wait till it gets down to about a half or a third of a bottle. I order a new bottle of it. I pour half of the new bottle into the old one and let the new one sit there with all that air on top of it for however long it takes me to use the rest of that the other bottle, which now has a little more ink in it, but still has a lot of air on top. And I find that keeps it dark. I've been like, oh, I like it a lot better now that I let it. If I let it sit for 3 months, it works fine.
Yep. That's that. I heard that as well. As one of those things you let it dry a little bit. I just looked over at the art desk to see what jar I have in it, and it's an FW. But I know that the ink in here is not all FW
See,
because it
I
feels
don't
kind of
like
light, and it's been a while
I
since
don't
I've done
like
any ink.
I put ink in my own jars
Okay.
because I just it's just easier for me to use ink out of these than those ones with a narrow top that you can't see the level of the ink in. So I put all my ink like uh there's my Liquitex ink. If I open this, it's probably solid because I don't think I've used this in a while. Let's see. Let's see if it's solid. Oh no, it's still liquidy, but it's a little thick.
Okay.
And then I've got my oh, here's a random thing of India ink. Oh, that's pretty thick. I don't think I've used this in ages. That's just sitting there. And then the Ultra Draw, this is the Rapidograph ink that I refill all of my markers with.
Okay.
Any of these little black markers get refilled with this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the ink I usually use as well for my pens.
Mm-hmm. And here's a comic that came out this week that I worked on. This is the second and last issue for now. They're All Terrible. And this is one with, these are both Pantone colors. So it's not your normal pink and blue. It's your Pantone pink and blue. And with gloss varnish on it. You can see them in the light. There we go. Woo! But when I was doing this one, since I had such trouble with the first one, figured out how to do it. And I found out the artist who did this works in GIMP. Have you ever heard of that? It's it's a free Photoshop sort of thing. My sister actually, at my sister's school up in the high school where they have it, they use GIMP because it's free. Who is this? Ramon Villalobos. So he uses GIMP. That's why, like with the first issue, they had trouble getting it over to me, the high res file. So for this one, they got over to me the high res file to begin with, and I think it was like 1100 DPI, and I just worked at it at 1100 DPI, just to get the colors, to get the selections of the colors so perfect. But it came out nice with all these teeny tiny lines printed on it. It's really only 2 issues, but it's also to be continued. So when this is sort of like Bad Idea 2, when Bad Idea 3 comes around, they might continue some of these. But it's got some really nice art in it. But yeah, what's his name? Ramon Villalobos. He's done other stuff for Bad Idea, I know. But his stuff is pretty cool. There's a nice gloss back cover on the figure. But yeah, I like the way this cover came out. But is this the one? No, it was the last week's one. There's like a fingerprint in the gloss. I'm like, oh, who touched this? Wasn't me when the gloss was still glossy. I think, a matter of fact, I think this is the last comic of Bad Idea 2. So whenever they started, because they printed stuff at the end of 2021 into 2022, and they printed stuff at the end of 2022 into 2023. So now the stuff that I'm working on them for is like they're doing some Kickstarters and stuff to sell at cons. Best Frank Quitely imitator in the biz. Love his stuff. Yeah, his stuff is nice. I don't know if I'd call him a Frank Quitely imitator, but he's got a lot. I think he's got more. In some cases, he really is. I don't think I can dispute that the more I look at it. You can call him a Frank Quitely imitator. I didn't quite think so until I looked closer and then went, aha. What do I think of Bad Ideas marketing antics? Hey, it's gotten some attention, so why not? and a lot of their antics, like their
What
original
antics are they
antics.
doing?
Well, some of the recent antics, like stuff they do at cons, is the first antic would be that when they first came out last year, you could only find their comics in 300 comic shops. And that kind of made them in demand and put them on the map. But a lot of people, a lot of people are, of course, upset by that, because if their comic shop didn't get the Bad Idea comic, they couldn't get it. And I think if you if you were a comic shop and wanted to participate in Bad Idea, you had to only sell one to a customer and not sell them online for a month. So you couldn't just flip them online immediately. That was part of being a Bad Idea comic shop. But the real, one of the real ideas behind that was they didn't want to deal with comic shops who didn't want to sell their comic. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, that they're like, why do we want to spend all our time and energy trying to get comic shops who don't want to sell our comic to sell our comic? Why don't we spend our time and energy with the comic shops who want to sell our comic? So they turned a negative that most comic shops don't want to buy some small company into a positive, into, you can only get it exclusively at these 300 comic shops. And that gave them some buzz. But it put off a lot of people, too.
Because, my first knee-jerk reaction is, how many comic book shops are there anyway?
Yeah. I think there's like 3,000.
Okay. Because I
Say
knew a
with love
publisher...
has expressed his admiration for Quietly pretty regularly. Okay, I've never heard from him. So. My only problem is the unnecessary artificial scarcity gimmick. See, it's not artificial scarcity. That's just it. Those comic shops wouldn't be buying their comic anyway. That's just it. You can actually call my comic shop up and order some copies of it. You can call up any comic shop that carries it. It looks like they did a good job of turning a problem into a benefit. A comic shop could order as many copies as they wanted. If a comic shop could order 10,000 copies, there was no artificial scarcity. Comic shops ordered as many copies as they could sell. But people perceive, you're right though, people perceived it as artificial scarcity. People perceived it as, they don't want me to have that comic. Some people at least. And you can understand that. I mean, I do. But your comic shop wasn't going to buy Bad Idea comics anyway. That's just it. It's not like, I mean, they went with the comic shops that would sell them. Yeah. It's not like, they were turning down Midtown Comics, as far as I know. But they just did something where, I think it was months ago, before Bad Idea 2, there was a special comic that they printed up a few hundred copies of. Bunsen Beaver #1. They're doing #2 right now. And they were only selling it at this one con. And they weren't selling the comic. They were selling donuts. And if you bought the donut, you got the comic. And the donut was like $20 or something. So and the comic was donut themed, kind of. So you'd go up there, you'd buy the donut, and they'd give you the comic.
Was the donut shaped?
Like that going on. But what was that?
Was the comic donut shaped?
It was not, but there was a nice illustration of a donut on the back.
I wonder if you can make a donut shaped comic.
Well, they put bullet holes in the comic once, so I imagine you could. You'd have to punch out the center. It wouldn't be easy. You'd have to be able to figure out how to manufacture it.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to production. Don't think of comic books. Think children's books. And I'm sure you could find a round or a donut-shaped children's book.
You're right there.
Because you could get lettered books where it looks like the D or C or what have you. So it wouldn't be that hard. You just got to basically find it in another printer. You're not going to get your comic printer to do it.
Yeah. Speaking of children's books, what I also read this week for the first time since I was probably a child or around then was Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. I don't know if you remember that famous children's book.
I remember the book itself. I don't think I ever read it myself. I don't know what year that published. So
63.
63. So that would have been on the shelves when I was
Yeah,
a
it's
kid.
been a perennial and evergreen.
Right. So, but I don't recall ever reading it myself. I don't recall ever owning a copy of it in our house. My family is pretty large, so we had different generations. So
Right.
there were always children books coming in. So there was always a
Mhm.
group, so to speak. But that one I knew of, but I never read it myself.
Let's see. They leaned into the artificial scarcity speculator market to their detriment. My feeling is if you're making comics, you should make them accessible to people who want to read them. That's just it. They were making them accessible. The comics, they turned it around. There were the comic shops that didn't want to carry them. They said, well, you can't have them. That's not making them accessible.
Yeah, it was marketing, you know.
It was a
Yeah.
good marketing ploy because, again,
Right.
I go back to going to comic book shops all the way back to the 80s and 90s. And I do recall talking to people, because one of the things I love doing when I travel and I meet up with a friend that I haven't seen for a while, it's like, all right, where do you get your comics? Let's take a trip to that comic book shop to just check out what they're getting. So, and I used to do a lot of conventions. So I always make sure that while I'm out there, I always see what their shops are. And I clearly remember not going to this particular shop, but I had a friend of mine who I talked to. He's like, oh, where are you getting your comics? And he's like, he goes to two places. And I goes, why? Because he likes one place because they have a certain set of books. He likes the other place because how quiet it is. And he's like, what do you mean it's quiet? It's because this one shop will not sell a Marvel comic. They'll sell everything else but Marvel comics. And I was like, why? Because the owner did not like Marvel comics, reading Marvel comics growing up. And it's like, okay, but why limit yourself? And it's like, and the guy's, this is my shop. I'm going to sell what I want to sell. And he was open long enough to be able to sell all the other books without selling Marvel comics. And that's the thing is like, why would Marvel even attempt to go to that shop then if the guy refuses to sell? And I think it's the same type of mentality. If you don't want to sell my books, why should I talk to you? Why spend that much energy beating down that door for one or two books to sell? So I get it. I get the bad idea concept to go and do it. And yeah, it creates.
If you don't want to work the direct market, you can sell them online. You just said they were making them. You're just complaining they weren't making them accessible enough. Now now you want to make them less accessible. It seems like they were just hyping themselves up only to shoot. I think they were hyping themselves. I don't think they shot themselves in the foot with Bad Idea 1. I think they shot themselves in the foot with Bad Idea 2 in that they didn't have the same hype this year they had last year. So I know at my comic shop owner told me that the people who were interested in Bad Idea last year didn't come back this year. So I think that's where I don't know what that had to do with, but Sendak, Maurice Sendak is wonderful. Love in the Night Kitchen and Outside Overall there as well. Some good stuff. Slipping that Bad Idea. First of all, if you're going to accuse me of sipping that Bad Idea Kool-Aid, you better know it ain't Kool-Aid. It's Flavor Aid. That's what Jim Jones used. Despite the fact that
correct.
The colloquial expression is Kool-Aid, you better come in here with some knowledge on this show and say Flavor Aid, okay? Because we go deep on this show. We go deep. We know who Jim Lubbers is.
That's great.
I usually never correct anybody on that because there's no point. Because the common saying is Kool-Aid.
It's so common, but again, it's one of those things. It's like,
but in that case, I had to.
I am fascinated by how Bad Idea put theirs together. Only because I remember, and I looked this up fairly recently. It was like, Malibu had commercials running on national television, and I don't think anyone's really done that since, except for the Marvel G.I. Joe commercials that ran for a short while.
The comic books existed because of those commercials. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, they made rules that you could not advertise the toys on the a animated show couldn't be a commercial for the toys.
Right.
They put that specific rule in the FCC guidelines, so they made the comic book so they could advertise that.
Yep.
I'm not trying to get you to talk shit on your employer, but I think if you're making comics, make them accessible for all. As far as I know, you couldn't pre-order them online. I don't think they're selling them online. You're right. I don't think there's I think they might be planning to sell digital copies in the future because I've made digital copies and delivered them to them. They just have no plan for them yet. I think if someday there's a plan to sell them digital, they'll have the copies ready, but I don't know that there's any plan for it right now. But yeah, once again, I don't think they were trying to make them inaccessible. I think they were trying to take their inaccessibility and make it a feature.
It just didn't work very well.
Stores that agreed. Yeah, but they were limited. They came up with those restrictions after the store. It was like the stores were going to sell them first, and then they came up with the restrictions. It wasn't like it. If they could have gotten them into all 3,000 stores and sold 10 times as many copies, I'm sure they would have. But that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, they should have sold. Our rare number one is already sold out, so you better be ready for our next rare number one.
Yeah. Matter of fact, on their Bad Idea has done first printings and not first printings. That's what they call their second printings. And their first comic book that came out, which was before I was even working for them, the first printing and the not first printing came out the same week. It was like, what? That was Roy, the comic shop owner, had to explain that to everyone who came in. He was like, well, this one's the first printing. This one's not the first printing. Everybody was like, what are you talking about? Because usually, every other time that you'd get the first printing and then a not first printing like a couple weeks later. For some reason, the first issue both came out the same week.
But again, marketing-wise, that's a great idea. Yeah. I like the cleverness of it because you're taking the limitations that gets put onto us about, selling books and stuff like that. The hoops that we got to jump through
Wilson,
to get books into the comic book shop.
You self-published your own book, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many comic shops did you think you got into?
2.
Exactly.
Because I physically brought them there for a signing, and they're like, oh, we want to buy some copies from you. So I know I sold 10 in one shop, 10 in another shop because I was there for like free comic book day. And they, so I sold them directly to the shops that way. But our books were available online, and we sold them at conventions. And every time we would talk to someone, hey, we want to sell this in your shop, they'll be going, oh, are you in previews? Because they do not want to, and again, the comic book shop could do what they want to do.
In 1997,
but they want to they wanted to make it easy for themselves. If you're in previews, then we'll buy it.
And that's the way they can blow you off too.
Exactly.
In 1997 or so, when my friends and I self-published our own comic and we went through Diamond previews, we even had Diamond send out. We paid Diamond money to send an issue to everybody. We were in 30 comic shops, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's the so to think that Bad Idea, that 3,000 shops would buy Bad Idea's new comics, they knew they weren't. They knew they weren't gonna. That's the way it worked. When you're a new company, comic shops don't want to. There are comic shops that won't buy anything but Marvel and DC. Probably about half the comic shops out there. I've known people who go into their local comic shop and say, can you order this indie comic for me? And the comic shop says no. see it all the time on YouTube, which is crazy to me, but they don't want to be bothered.
And even so, even with previews, and this happened many times, that I would take an issue of previews and go through it and find things that I like, whether they're comic books or whatever, and give it to the comic book shops. They would say, there's no guarantee you'll get this item.
Yeah.
It's in previews. And it's like, yeah, but sometimes we just don't get things in.
Right.
And it's like, how is that even a thing? And then you want
how
me
is
to
that
maybe
a business model that works?
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea
so
the idea that Bad Idea found a way to turn that into a positive, to me, is amazing.
Yeah, completely. Because
I understand people who are upset that they can't get them because they were a hot book for a while. I can understand them being upset, but probably your comic shop wasn't getting them to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with the incentive cover culture. Likely the only thing that's keeping a lot of shops in business. That is true that is keeping print runs up. But that's the way some people collect. Some people, I think what it is it is so easy to collect comics these days that there are people who want stuff that it's not easy to collect. They're not they're not really self-publishing though. Yeah, that's why they got in 300 shops and I got in 20.
Yeah.
In the conventional sense, they weren't completely unknown. They juiced all their I know they did. That's why they got into 300 shops. I'm saying they weren't getting into 3,000. Good evening, Sleepy Reader.
Hello, Sleepy Reader.
With all those connections, they couldn't get into 3,000 shops.
I'm going to begin eating my dinner, and I usually do not eat on film, but I'm hungry, so I'm going to start eating my soup. I'm just going to put this on mute.
We'll let Paulo talk for a while. He doesn't get all that. He doesn't have any comic shop talk because he doesn't have any comic shops near him.
I have 2 comic shops.
That's right. You got 2 comic shops. Do you go to them often?
Nope.
No, never.
Not
How
anymore.
far? That's right. They're far. They're like an hour from you or something, right?
Yeah, but that's not far. That's where
far
I go where I would go to work. It would be an hour away.
Okay, but to me, that would be far for a comic shop trip.
Well, no, I mean it's the cap. I am 26 miles away from the capital city.
Right.
And how long it takes me to get to the comic shop depends on whether I take public transportation or I drive, and how easy is it to park, what time of the day it is.
Darren is, but I'm saying that is a trip. That's something like the comic. My comic shop is 20 minutes away. It's 20 minutes away.
Right.
It's 20 minutes away. If I had to go into New York City to go to a comic shop, which is 35 miles away from me, I wouldn't be going to the comic shop every week because it would be by public transportation. It would be a 2-hour trip. By car, it would be an hour trip and $15 in tolls.
Yes, because the comic shops here were created specifically so they could sell imported comics in a foreign that are published in a foreign language. So they already appeal to a more specialized crowd that are willing to put up with the extra work of getting those comics.
Do they resemble U.S. comic shops? Do you have any idea?
Not in the same way. They're cleaner.
Uh-huh.
And not in the Simpsons comic book shop kind of way. They even the way that they're designed, it's easy. They're easier to navigate inside.
Yeah, my comic shop is cluttered a little bit. It doesn't look like a slick commercial space because it's in an old building in an old town. And it's perfectly nice to go in and look at the comics and whatever. And it's got nice displays on the wall or whatever, but it's not like an Apple store. or anything in that genre where every little commercial area is thought about. There's sometimes boxes piled up over here. The window really isn't good for displays because the building was cut in half 75 years ago, and this half is this thing, and this half it's almost like a railroad apartment. My local comic shop. If anyone out there knows what a railroad apartment is, that's a New York City apartment that used to be like the apartment buildings used to be a whole floor in the olden days, and then they cut those floors in half in order to go from one room to the next, like a railroad cars. You have to go through the whole apartment. That's kind of what my comic shop is, a railroad apartment.
So let me see if I can show you some pictures from the comic shop I go to more often.
I owned a comic shop, and it was very clean and well organized. Some comic shops are. I mean, I'm not saying like mine is clean and well organized. It's just not. It's just not like a commercial. It's not a chain commercial space that we're used to. It's like we're not used to mom and pop stores anymore. Mom and pop stores of any caliber always have a little character to them.
Yeah.
I'm finding shops are more like Midtown now, where it's open, bright would probably be the best word. Because again, I've been to comic book shops where they were converted warehouses. Or they were just an open space that started as one portion of that open space, and then as other stores closed down, they just took it over, knocked down walls, and they just became bigger and bigger. So it really depends on the shop itself. And then I've been to shops that were hole in the walls, where it's like, I didn't even know there was a shop here.
Comic shops are not franchises, and they're mom and pop. What stores? Bookstores. They're almost all franchises. Like video game stores were if you go into a video game store, Electronics Boutique or all the other, they're all the same. They all have the same fittings. They all have the same polish. Comic shops don't necessarily, like I said, they're not necessarily dirty or anything or disorganized, but they're not slick commercial spaces all the time.
There was my friend's got two stores in New Jersey. This is Zap Comics. There's one in Wayne, New Jersey, and one in Manalapan, and he's had stores since like the mid 90s or like 93, 94ish, but he was a retailer at shows. That's how I knew him originally. The Great Eastern shows that were like in Wayne and Paramus, New Jersey. So he had experience retailing comics, for 5-10 years previous to owning a store, which was one of the key things, because a lot of the stores that popped up in the 90s during the boom where guys opening stores with their personal collections and not really having the experience retailing, the business savvy and the experience. So, but he told me though, I'm going off a little tangent here. During the down times in the mid to late 90s, what kept his stores afloat, and he'll say it publicly, was he was selling like a lot of Spawn toys, sending them to Japan. There was a big international market for those, first initial waves of the McFarlane toy stuff, right? But his stores are very healthy now. And he has a very robust buying and selling business, lots of back issues and high-end stuff.
Okay, so
that's a slick commercial space, definitely.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, you can see the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so
that is not a 150-year-old building that's been split in half.
No, that's a super bright.
That building's about 70 years old.
Okay.
It's great looking space, though.
Yeah. And this is half of the store. Then it has to the back. Let me see if I can find another picture. Okay, so let's stop sharing. And I think there's one of the back of the store around here.
Many shops are dominated by long boxes, which immediately makes them more scruffy. Yeah, I can agree with that.
You can't find the long boxes. You can't find the long boxes, but they take up about 5% of the store. 30% of the store are Funko Pops nowadays.
Yeah. I still consider myself lucky in a city with 530,000 that I have 3 comic stores in walking distance. Wow. All 3 cater to different publishers and clients. That is lucky.
What city is that? Where is he?
He's in, where is it? St. John's up in Canada. still go to Rogers Time Machine and Koch's Warehouse right here.
Oh,
I've never
Koch's
been to
Warehouse.
Koch's Warehouse.
Told you, man. Used to
I go
love
to
their
Midtown if
ads
I'm
back
looking
in
for
the
new
80s.
comics, but I read so few new books these days.
But Koch doesn't he a partial owner of Forbidden Planet or some kind of business association?
I think
That's my understanding.
I think we did. There were. It used to be partners with someone, and then the partners.
Something like that. That was that Koch Dolgoff Koch. Maybe it was two Koch brothers and Dolgoff. They would. I mean, this has happened a long time. They unearthed those warehouse finds back in the late 80s.
Right. That's definitely a bookstore feel.
Yeah, that's the back of the shop. Yeah,
most comic shops can't afford a space that big.
So on the left there are books that are in Portuguese, including all of the Portuguese publishers. The one to the back of the wall is a fairly recent edition. It's only French books. And to the right is manga.
I love the corner boxes, poster kind of things on the left on the wall.
Is that Iron Man, Hulk, Spider-Man?
Yeah, he had them. He commissioned them commissioned for the store.
What? And so in the store, is there any direct American imports, or is it all translations and like American?
No, they're mostly they're direct American imports.
Oh, they are.
For a while, there was no interest in selling Portuguese comics in Portuguese comic shops. They were made specifically for imported U.S. editions. But since even the core audience has aged, they are now more likely to try new stuff, and there's even a small segment of the audience who is willing to wait for the book to be published in Portuguese if they feel that the book is being published in Portuguese, or if they missed it the first time around, and that way they don't have to wait for it to come out again. They just buy the Portuguese edition. Also,
what would you say
we actually have better production quality in some cases.
What would you say has been the impact of the movies over the last 10, 15 years in terms of interest of the original source material, like in Portugal and like a store like this?
Absolutely none.
Zero. Okay.
Zero, completely.
Just like America.
The new kids, the new kids are mostly interested in manga. They watch anime. They don't care. If they care about the superhero movies, that doesn't translate into comic book sales.
Yeah.
Although there is one publisher who tries to make sure that the comic, if a TV series, even mildly successful, is based on a comic book, if it's an indie comic, they try to make sure that it's available, because it's usually a collection that ends fairly quickly, and even the readers don't have to commit to it.
Let's see. May have a mom and pop feel to it, but still very professional space.
Yeah.
That's in Central City Comics in Surrey, British Columbia. Oh, and Tit Goblins is, St. John's in Newfoundland has the 3 shops.
Wow.
For 530 people. Guess you need a woman's touch. Yeah. I want something highly curated and organized, or something that feels like a fire hazard. The comic shop that I go to is somewhere in the middle, but it's really, I mean, the guy who runs it has a day job, but he telecommutes too. So the store's actually only open, I think, 3 or 4 days a week. So,
do you think he's making money there, or is it just a kind of labor of love thing?
He's making money, and it's a labor of love. He's making money, but he's not making a salary as if he would. He gets every comic he ever wants, even the expensive ones. In terms, he gets he just got the Frank Frazetta Taschen book he was showing me, and he gets all stuff like that through. He can buy. He doesn't need to run the shop. Because he's got, like I said, he does programming for one of the credit card companies,
right?
And the other guy who John, who works there with him in the shop, is a retired New York City cop. So neither of them, they're doing it for the love of comics. So it's like, they don't have the incentive to make it a highly polished. Not that it's bad.
They just love it.
Yeah, they just love it. So,
but if you're talking about chains, there's the small regional chains, like the ones that come to mind are New England Comics, Graham Crackers in Chicago, Mile High, and maybe a few there down in Florida. There was Tropic Comics. Remember, I'm trying to think of this is like some of these are like chains have kind of gone or got condensed down to like one or two stores. But back in like the late 80s, early 90s, New England Comics, they had a huge mail order business, but like and then they had like 6, 7, 8 stores in New England, and of course, then their big success was actually the Tick, who knew they were getting into publishing, and
right. And like Eliza says here, she closed her store for personal reasons and regretted it. No money in it, but very rewarding. That's why I think my store is still open, is just because he's got a day job. There's probably not that much money in it. And there's one customer who buys every comic every month. And he's like, this guy's keeping the shop open himself.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, I hope he doesn't go away.
Trying to see if I can find pictures of the other store, but I haven't really been there a lot in the last few years. The main reason being that it's impossible to park there now.
If I knew what Cevish's was, I might be able to answer that question.
Ceviche. Ceviche. Food. It's a food.
Ah, okay.
Jared, though, when you come into the city to teach, that is what's the closest comic store to there where you're teaching?
I don't even know. I walk from Penn Station down 7th Avenue to 14th Street. I don't think there's any. Maybe Forbidden Planet's down on 8th, right?
On 8th, yeah, right.
But where is it? Which side of town is it on?
Forbidden Planet is basically Union Square. It's like 13th. It's in like the corner of like 13th or it's next to. It's almost next to Strand. It's that same block.
Okay, that's over on Broadway, right?
Yeah, correct. It's right if you are in Union Square. It's right below.
I'd have to walk quite a bit across town to get to there.
Sure.
And same with where is Hanley's now? That's on 33rd, right? But all the way across town.
Does Hanley? That store's. I haven't been in because remember how they moved around over the years. They used to have that big store in the Manhattan Mall. And Cosmic's and we talked about Cosmic. Everyone was 387.
That was on
Park
23rd
Avenue South
Street.
Market. That was the big one, right? So,
there's none on my path. I'd have to go out of my way in order to.
Right.
And I'm always rushing to catch a train. Yeah, I'd have to go in early and go to the comic shop, which I do sometimes.
I need to go. I'll go. Well, actually, I was in Forbidden Planet not too long ago because right in that block over is Blick's Art Supplies. So I did that little field trip.
Oh yeah,
but
every comic every month. What do you think the average yearly cost would be? A lot. I think he's an anesthesiologist, which means he makes good money. But yeah, the cost would be high.
Couple $100 a week.
On a warehouse, even.
How many new comics? Let's say $4 a comic, 50 comics a week, new releases. I'm just kind of arbitrarily saying that. $200
just
a week.
South of Union Square on Broadway. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I'd have to go across town. Broadway. For those of you who also don't know, Broadway runs diagonally across Manhattan's grid. So by the time it's on 14th Street, it's across town from 7th Avenue.
It's a really good store. And like when I was back in my intern days of Marlowe, 93, 94, I remember, remember the name John Taddeo, who was a marketing guy there? I worked with him in Sven's department, but he was, he was talking about, sorry about the noise. He was talking about the psychology of store merchandising. It doesn't have to be comics, it could be anything, right? It could be like a hot topic where, you have to walk through all this stuff to get to the other stuff. So at Forbidden Planet, you need to walk through the store to the back walls where they have their wall of new comics. And so what you've walked through is action figures and trade paperbacks and stuff, and you get in there. But I was going back to say there might be no other place to put the new comics, but there's other walls they could put there. So I think it's a well organized store.
It says I stopped by Desert Island when I make it to Brooklyn too. Is Court Street Comics still there? I used to go to that one when I was hanging out in Brooklyn a lot. That was a pretty good shop. I think
that sounds familiar. Do they have a lot of indies
on
there?
Court Street.
Oh,
nice big shop. It probably opened in the mid to late 90s. Yeah.
Do they have independent books there? Were they big on like indies? Yeah, I think I remember that.
There was a pretty big shop with a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, do I have 3 keys here? Hold on, let me show you. What? Pardon me. This is 3 keys. The guy who draws sort of like Adam Hughes. And this is, I guess, the last issue. It was at least the end of the 4th story arc. I don't know if any more are coming out. But in fact, where is... it was St. Mark's Comics that I thought was St. Mark's Comics in this. I don't think I saw a sign for, but this is when, remember when I think St. Mark's closed or moved. Remember they were on the bottom, they were on the ground.
Oh, totally.
Ground
Yeah.
floor. Yeah. I don't know if they're still there. I remember hearing they closed. But
I think they're long gone. What was there was a record store right above them?
Across the street from them was a record store.
There's probably I would guess there's multiple.
Yeah, I can't remember what was right above them. But I think
I really like that
it
cover.
used to be above and then moved below. Forbidden's old location had a second story, right? I don't remember. They had a downstairs, right? You're muted.
I didn't realize it. Yeah. So Forbidden Planet, they used to be. They kept moving within the area that they're currently in. So in the 80s, when I first went there, they were across the street, and they had a second floor. It was the basement. So
right.
They had the top floor had. So the top floor had the comic books were in the back. The rest of the store had the regular novels and things like that. And then back issues would be downstairs. Back issues would be downstairs. So that was how they were. And then they moved to a corner for a couple of years. And then from the corner, they moved to the boutique-ish shop they kind of are in now.
I ask about the Carashes because another good thing about Koch, they have snacks.
They do.
That's right.
I've been to that warehouse once. But
what did they put out there? Like, I've been there once, but not for a long time.
It was an iced tea. I know they had iced tea that was there to drink. I don't recall anything to nosh on the time I went there.
You know what was cool was there they had this whole separate room with, and Felicity, let me know if you saw it, with a bunch of like French edition hardcover kind of stuff. It might have been not just Mobius, but it was like all kinds of stuff. Like it was really good looking, like, graphic album kind of stuff. And don't ask me, maybe they acquired it just on the cheap, but I went there once, maybe 15 years ago. I have complete curiosity because I remember reading about it so much and wanting to do the kind of the treasure hunt. That's if you're talking about like a cobwebby kind of warehouse, have to walk over boxes. That's how I remember it, and I loved it.
It was a little more organized when I went there. There was only one room that I had access to that time, and it reminded me very much of the old Strand's bookstore, where it was, you could walk through it, but it was really packed with stuff. So you had to really poke and choose and look. But I was kind of used to that type of a comic book shop because there was a place in Seattle where I went to that was kind of like, I guess, a converted garage because it was just one big room. And speaking of fire hazards, you had aisles to go down, but even the owner did not know what he had. Because stuff would be just within things. That's where I pulled out a Michael Golden print that he had no idea what it was from. And I was able to guess that eventually it had to be one of those portfolios because everyone was doing a portfolio thing in the
Doctor Strange.
Right. So this was the Defenders by Michael Golden. So I had taken that out, and I thought it was a cool thing. And that was because they had Spider-Man on it. It was like I think it was originally a double-page spread in the Defenders. And I wasn't reading the Defenders. Actually, the Defenders were done by the time I was reading comics. Anyway, so I was just really getting it for the Spider-Man 2-page. Flash. And then later, I had brought it to Michael to get it signed, to find out that he was looking for a copy of that because Todd McFarlane credits that image for the influence of the spaghetti webbing.
The
Todd
Spider-Man spaghetti webbing.
Yeah, Todd did not create the spaghetti.
Yeah, I remember. I've heard Todd say that before too.
Yeah,
it's from the poster,
Michael
right?
Yeah, that's the exact poster I was talking about. So Michael was like, "Oh, can you get me a copy of this poster?" Because they were putting together a book at the time, and Todd was writing the frontal piece for it, and they needed an image. And it was like, "Oh, okay." So I ended up scanning mine. So the image that appears in that book is from my collection. And again, you can see it and it's a simple image, but it is the spaghetti webbing that,
for sure.
Todd loved it, using. So again, it was one of those things where it was just found in this shop that is like a treasure hunt. Now that I'm older, I don't even like going to a back issue bin, and if they're not in alphabetical order, I don't even want to try anymore. I can't do the hunts like that anymore.
Did anybody ever have a good experience at St. Mark's? Because I never did, and neither did Architectural Foam Panels and Columns.
I enjoyed my experience there. I never had a problem with it, but it wasn't my home shop. It was someplace that I would stop by once a month or what have you.
Did they ever follow you around to make sure you weren't shoplifting?
Yes. Yes. But as a Hispanic boy from the Bronx, I was used to that. So
yeah, I don't remember them following me around, but I don't remember being able to go anywhere in that store. It was jammed with stuff.
Yeah, it was very tight in there.
St. Mark's moved to a new space in Industry City in Brooklyn. Wow. Okay.
I saw their name popped up fairly recently at a Comic-Con, so I saw that like the signage was being reused, and I heard rumors that they were going to open up again, but this is the first time I've actually heard of a spot.
Isn't the Beguiling like a Canadian shop in Quebec? I think. I know whoever the owner is always got quoted a lot in comic stuff, but
I definitely have heard of that for sure.
Yeah. I think it was Canadian.
You know what impressed me back in the day?
Deeply influenced by Golden and Adams. It's in Toronto. Sure. There we go. The Beguiling from Toronto.
The first time I ever saw
you needed effing help.
I was also under the impression that Art Adams arrived on the industry just a couple of years before Todd.
Yeah, just a couple of years, but that's how much influence he had. And Michael Golden had tons of influence on them.
Yeah, for sure. Like the first time I saw spaghetti webbing was Art Adams on the cover of Long Shot 3 or 4 with the Spider-Man and She-Hulk, and that was the first time I saw the webbing like that. But when Todd came along in 87-ish, 88, like with the webbing, I'm like, wait, he looks just like Art Adams. But what I wasn't realizing is that they're both equally influenced, I think, by Michael Golden. That's where it was all coming from. But in terms of comic shops, the one thing that always impressed me is back like when I heard my first Overstreet guide, like the big guy, like back in like late 80s, mid to late 80s, was Heroes Aren't Hard to Find. That's why is his name escaping right now? The owner of Heroes Aren't Hard to Find. Really nice guy, like down in the Carolinas, but like that their logo was so far. Like every other logo was just like amateurish, like handwriting or just like kind of like plain type. Their logo was like a comic book logo, like he had it professionally done, like by some letter or something,
right?
And it was just so it was almost too good. I was like, is this really a comic store that has like a logo like this? God, his name is escaping me right now, but like but good for him, like that they had this.
I remember that logo in ads.
Yeah, that's where I saw it in ads, like in Overstreet and stuff. And then, of course, Heroes Con exists to this day. The stores are still there, as far as I know.
Heroes aren't hard to find. It's funny. Speaking of those guys, I think it's Eric Larson tells a story. Something about the way Venom is drawn with teeth or something. I forget how it goes because I don't know Venom that well. Got a name,
Shelton Drum. You got it. Thank you so much.
And someone like online credited Eric Larson with I forget what something to do with how you draw venom in teeth or claws or something like that.
It's
Eric
the tongue.
What was that?
It's Venom's tongue.
Oh, Venom's tongue.
Who gets credit for the tongue being very long?
And Eric Larson said, "No, I didn't do that. I copied Todd McFarlane or someone." And Todd McFarlane went, "I didn't draw his tongue that long."
Yeah.
So then Eric Larson went back and looked at the covers that he thought Todd had drawn a long tongue on Venom in, and he didn't. And Todd was like, "Oh, I guess I did invent that. I thought I was copying Todd." That was it, the tongue.
Yeah, with the tongue.
I don't remember Todd drawing any tongue anywhere.
Yeah.
No, not a long tongue.
The big mouth jowl would be open, but the tongue would stay in the mouth.
I think Eric eventually found an image he thinks would inspired him to draw it longer than it should have. And I think there was, but it may not have been a McFarlane one anyway, because McFarlane never drew it long. So it might have been one of those things where he saw a quick image of something, and then just went wild with it, and then that becomes the norm with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, he added to the imagery.
No one wants to take credit for the tongue.
It could be.
I like Venom, but then
316.
From what?
316. Because he has a. That's where Larson may have thought that he saw. That he saw the tongue, so you can see the tongue inside.
Is it a McFarlane drawing?
Yeah, you can see the tongue inside, and there's a close-up that I remember because the Black Cat returns to Peter Parker's old apartment, from which they were kicked out because of Mary Jane's stalker, and there's a close-up where you can see the tongue is inside the mouth, but it kind of, because it's red, it calls out attention, all the attention to it, and that's maybe what inspired Larson.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like he's not saying that Venom didn't have a tongue; he just didn't have a long tongue, kind of a thing,
sticking out of his mouth.
Exactly.
What I miss about that time is I did love that stuff a lot because it was something really fun about it. But what I miss about it is that this is when books really had momentum with a creative team, where people it's build and build and build, issue over issue would the sales numbers were increasing, right? It was building momentum. People are jumping on the book. Now some speculators were jumping on, but it was but you saw that with so many books that had consistent creative teams that are popular. I mean, going backwards, I would guess the Claremont Byrne stuff, that's the same kind of ascension it had, or Miller on Daredevil.
Right. I was around for all that stuff. That stuff was getting more popular month to month. But X-Men was, as John Byrne points out, was still a cult book when he was on it. It didn't hit big sales numbers till he was gone. But it kept going up, of course.
Right. Yeah, they started the upward trajectory, It
was a build of itself. And I think that with the 90s, it was, I think something special was going on there with comics going mainstream, for lack of a better term, because right before that was going on, right before I entered the industry, I was really happy to see comic books have articles in the news. We didn't have that before. So before that, comics was something I shared with the few groups of people that I went to high school with, because they were into comics, because it was art. But that's because I went to high school of art and design, so we were all into comics. But right before that high school, when I was at 1 year I spent at a regular high school, there was maybe 2 people that were into comics, me and one of my other friends, and that's it. And we didn't even get to share anything about comics outside of basically we didn't talk about it in school,
right?
Because no one wanted you to be the comic book kid. Oh, don't talk to him. So to see comic books mainstream that way, having I remember John Byrne was being interviewed. They were talking about a Comic-Con. I didn't even know they had Comic-Cons. I want to go to a Comic-Con, and all this stuff that comics is something. and they just happened to hit at that right time. And Spider-Man, right before Todd came on, Spider-Man was getting really boring, art-wise and story-wise.
I think collected editions really did a lot of that though.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can remember in the 90s, Marvel specifically didn't want to do a lot of collected editions because they thought it would cannibalize their monthly sales. And I think it actually did. Think of how many people, nowadays wait for the collected edition.
Wait for the trade is the big expression, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's 100% normal. But I think that kind of kills the momentum. There's less excitement for monthly issues because there's people who just aren't interested. What percentage of comic fans would you say are not interested in monthly issues now? A lot. I mean, everybody I know who's a comics fan who's my age doesn't buy monthly issues. They barely buy trades, but that's a whole other story.
And that's why TKO
but I remember
has that model.
But see, I don't think that model affects anything.
I don't know if it does either. I'm saying, but at least they're saying here's multiple formats. Pick your format, so it comes out simultaneously.
Yeah, I know, but there's still no building. When you put out all the issues, even if they're individual issues, if you put them all out at once, there's no building month to month.
Oh, listen,
That's what I'm talking about.
When Netflix first started putting out shows, right? This is before I had a lot of people had Netflix, and I heard that they would release a season simultaneously, and which was like unheard of, right? No one had done this before, right? I was like astonished because he heard about binge watching, but I thought people meant like, oh, I'm waiting for the whole series to come out, then I'm going to watch it one weekend. And be like, no, they released the whole season together. I'm like, but then how do you build the kind of momentum in the water cooler talk in this day and age?
Mm-hmm.
To build and they backed off, Disney doesn't do that because they want that kind of. Netflix
has backed off that too. They're now they release half series now. Half the series
right?
Now.
Like the compromise is like Last of Us and HBO. They release the first 2 or 3 episodes and then.
But there are people, the binge watchers, who are really annoyed that they do that. Right. They want the whole series right now, and I think it's the same with comics. They're not in. A lot of comics fans there must be a large percentage of them who want the trade. They don't want the comic. So I think that is one of the factors. I think there's many factors that make the excitement of monthly comics less. Because
I think Paulo had a thought on that.
Now? What are the hot monthly comics now for Marvel and DC? I don't know.
Okay. No, but the problem doesn't have the problem is not related to the existence of trade paperback collections.
I think
nowadays it's because
I don't say that's the whole thing.
When issue number 1 of an event comes out, then they start advertising the next event that starts in 6 months.
I didn't say it was the only thing. That's for sure.
But
the constant cycle.
Around 2003, 2004, I remember there were a few writers complaining online that if you want to make sure there's a trade paperback, you also have to buy the monthly issues because they were gauging that the interest in the trade paperback would be based on the monthly issues. And Tom Brevoort did confirm, because he was asked about it, it wasn't talking about perennials, because if you put out a trade of the Dark Phoenix saga, everybody's always going to want to buy that one. But for the current series, the series that sold better in every month were also the ones that had highest TPB sales. So even if there's a crowd there, as long as there's some hype every month that keeps that comic fresh in people's head, the trade waiters will know that it's something that's worth picking up. So it's not really
but I think it halves the hype. You've got the hype for the comic, and you've got the hype for the trade paperback. It's different than when there was just hype for the comic. When there was hype for the comic and trades didn't exist, if you missed out on the comic, you missed out. Now, if you missed out on the comic, you pick up the trade.
Because one thing that Heroes Reborn did by putting out new number 1s, now everything always started from number 1s,
right?
Was that it convinced regular buyers that they had to start from number 1.
Yeah.
So if they miss number one, they would not start reading on number two.
That's a whole other factor. You're right, but that's another. Like I said, I don't think that the trade paperbacks are the only factor. There's a whole bunch of them, but I think they're one. I think Marvel was right in the 90s to think that common trade paperback collections would cannibalize their monthly sales. I don't know if it matters. I mean, I don't know. I mean, let's just say that I don't think it matters if they sell $1,000 worth of comic books with no trades, and then they sell $500 worth of comic books and $500 worth of trades. What does it matter? But I think there's less hype. I think that's why that monthly hype went away.
The monthly hype is being affected by a lot of stuff, and nowadays
you're right. Primary, not the only stuff, but that's one of the
primary culprit is the
when only half the customers are buying the monthly, the hype, of course, is going to go down. How does it not? You can't have as much hype with half the amount of people.
I'm really not sure. I mean, there's a way that you can advertise both for both markets.
Yeah.
But the trade paperback was always.
I've never seen hype over a trade paperback, though. I've never seen anybody get hyped over a collected edition.
No, but if we know there's hype for the comic, we will wait for the trade. The thing is, I always imagine that the trade waiters were a fraction of the monthly comics buyers, at least until Bendis came along and everything became a trade. Maybe not even 10%.
Do you think what was that? You think 10% of people are trade waiters?
Maybe at the time they wouldn't be. Nowadays, nowadays I don't believe it is either.
Yeah, now I don't know. What it is too is I don't have enough information because I don't know what the sales are, and also the sales of trades trickle in, like some trade, like a really good trade sells 2,000 copies a month. Now that doesn't sound like much, 2,000 copies a month, but they sell 2,000 copies a month for 4 years, and all of a sudden you're into real numbers.
If it's an evergreen book like that, yeah.
They don't sell 2,000 for 4 years. Even the trades.
New one, but some of them do. Like with Saga, which is one of the best-selling ones.
Okay.
When I read when it came back, it's the trade paperbacks of Saga have sold, all of them together have sold 11 million, or was 7 or 11, whichever number it is, million copies.
But that's the dream.
That's
comic
crazy.
The trade paperback becomes a perennial. That's the dream.
Right. But I'm saying trade paperbacks can do that. Comics get. That's why I don't know what numbers trade. It's tough to get what numbers trade paperbacks sell. As far as I know, I remember I used to be able to get them. But
well, what I heard is that ever since it first came out, even up to last year, because now they don't have numbers now because they don't tell them. But Watchmen was always the best-selling DC trade paperback.
Yeah, that's kind of
because it's self-contained, also, right?
Right, and it would sell. Yeah. It would still to this day sell 2,000 copies a month,
and it would be on lists like New York Times, like best 100 fiction of the past 100 years. It'd get that. It was one of the rare things that would get mainstream. But when I was in 2004, when I was back at Marvel, right? This is when there was that Joss Whedon,
X-Men,
Cassaday Astonishing X-Men. And I got back when I started working there again. It was onto issue 4. That's when Colossus came back. So I was in a print run meeting for the first trade paperback because this was in time for holiday shopping, right? So that was a really hot series. But my point is this was the quickest I've ever seen a single issue get collected into something, because the issue 6 came out maybe 2 weeks as a floppy, 2 weeks ahead of the trade that included it, because they wanted to get it out for holiday shopping, which is completely understandable. I remember the print run on that book of the trade was pretty astonishing. No pun intended for a trade paperback, because it was a 6 issue, so it was fairly inexpensive. It
Right.
was really good looking stuff. Yeah, it was a hot book. So like,
Had a
But
Hollywood
that
name
was-
attached to it.
yeah, and it was like slick looking stuff. I like, I liked it a lot. And so I was in that print run meeting, but like, listen, that's like a really good, it was 2004 or 5-ish at the time. There weren't all the movies people knew. There had been a couple of X-Men movies out, right? So
Mhm.
put that all together, it was a really good bookstore market and comic market trade paperback, right, to get out. And so
Right.
like the question is, like, are you worried about the trade cannibalizing the sales of issue 6, which came out only like 2 weeks earlier, or is it worth getting it out for the holiday season, which is the case, right?
It's
And you
worth
want
getting it
those-
out for the holiday season. I
Yeah, for
imagine.
sure. Yeah, for sure.
'Cause
Yeah,
if you
I
bought the
agree with
first
that.
5 issues, you're buying the 6.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
when DVD started coming out 6 months after the movie was on
Oh, yeah.
was on theaters? Did that cannibalize ticket sales?
I don't know.
No, I
think
mean,
about the-
we all remember how like that time frame started getting more and more compressed.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
we also
movies are
remember when completely different business
movies.
than comic books.
Yeah. We also remember that movies used to be in the theaters for a year.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
but
And
if they
movie
were
theaters
successful.
used to show one movie for a year.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark played at my local theater for 2 years. I think it was crazy.
So yeah, but I think just like in movies, the comics market evolved in the way that people want to consume the comic evolved. And it's the same thing with the Netflix binge, especially now with new technology. There was also the idea, if we put out the comic digitally, people won't want to buy the physical comic, which is probably
There
more
are
true in this
technical
case.
panels. He likes floppies, trades, anything physical.
Yeah.
Scott Kaufman doesn't buy floppies. Do you buy collected editions? There's the question.
Mhm.
Sorry, 6 patrol cars rolled up on the construction site across. I didn't see what's what. What did I miss? Format discussion? Yeah.
I have
mean,
to say, and it's my losing battle. I hate calling comic books floppies.
Yeah, I don't call them.
I can't stand that because floppies are discs. A
No,
comic book
right.
is the format of a comic book. This is a comic. Yes,
Yeah.
it does flop, but this is a guy. And again, that's just my
No,
thing.
I'm not gonna
I
shop
can't. I
anywhere
understand it, but it's like
Fine.
oh.
Okay, we'll start calling them pocket bendables.
I buy lots of collected editions.
I like
Okay.
that. I like that. I do pocket bendables. Fold them up and stick it in your pocket.
Bendable.
Mhm.
Back in like the go ahead, Wilson.
No. I was just going to say with watching trades and stuff like that. But as Pablo mentioned about digital comics, watching that evolve and see what it turned into, and then and I was there helping creating digital comics and traditional comics, and I do not know because I never got to see the numbers if there was any dip or rise in sales of those particular things. All I did see from use of people using it is that if they were buying it digitally, they were planning to buy it digitally, and they had no intention of buying it physically. And the people who bought it physically bought it physically, but there was no change in sales because those were the formats that those people enjoyed. There was some crossovers because it is easier just to download a book to do reference on something for $1 than it is digging it up from your collection and stuff like that. So to me, I found that when I was asked, should we do our books digitally or should we do it physically, I was basically saying do them both because whoever buys it physically was not planning to buy it digitally and vice versa.
Thank you, Wilson. Can't stand that term either, says Titko.
Thank you. We'll change it around. You and me, Tikoff, we'll change it around.
I tell you, like it wasn't part of my vocabulary for a long time either, but like just to differentiate it, like it could say sequential issues or monthlies instead of like.
I just call them comic books.
I do too. I call them comics, graphic albums, graphic novels, and then trade paperbacks. The terms are there and prestige.
Human Fly #6 is a comic book. Captain Marvel volume 16 number 3 is a floppy.
You know that okay. That's an interesting thing to look at it that way.
I'm not sure if it's up to volume 16, but if it isn't, it will soon be.
3 keys flops. They're all terrible. Does not flop.
Yeah.
Cardstock cover.
Ah.
What do you call
know, you
it?
talk about-
When it doesn't flop, huh?
Are they still doing? I think because I haven't been in comic book production for a while, but like there's some comics. I think Marvel is doing this as it's called self cover, meaning like whatever the interior stock was.
Self covered these days.
So the interior stock is the same as what's the
Same
actual
exact.
cover.
Most Image comics, most Marvel comics.
It's just
most
another
DC
page folded
comics.
over.
It's just the same exact cover stock as this. Nothing
Same
different.
exact weight and gloss
Yep.
identically.
Because the interior pages are so glossy that the cover
Yeah,
doesn't have to be
supports it.
glossy.
Yeah.
But there's stuff like sometimes they're just like so thin though that I'm like I can't. Like there have been comics I've put back on the shelf because I don't like the feel of them.
Right.
There's just
When
so
the
thin.
pages warp, that's due to the pages being too thin to support the ink.
Yes, at least I
Okay.
think so. Because I think there is some paper so cheap that it comes pre-warped. I'm not sure.
Could be, yeah.
Because
But it
like
feels
most
that way.
things, like there's one I was just looking at today. This one, Grimm. I think it was this one. Let me see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very warped. Let me see if I can get it in the light right there. Look at that. See all those
I see it,
lines?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's red and a little black. That's what's the in the back? Some blue? That shouldn't be that warped with that.
So maybe the paper's like that is what you're saying.
I'm thinking this paper is so cheap, it's already warped to begin with. That's all I can think. Like all this black could warp it because Photoshop's default black is too much ink for this paper. Photoshop's default black is 300% ink saturation. This paper, I don't think, can handle 300% ink saturation. But there are other pages in it that are, let's see. No, these ones look good. I don't see any little warping over there.
I see a bit of warping on the top.
Yeah. But these are black. Like this one should have, this one has even more. Look at that.
Yeah. That's very heavy.
That's the black ink. Too much ink for the paper. But like something like this, but also, like I said, Photoshop's default. In the 90s, we always used top ink saturation was 240%. For those of you who don't know what that means there's four printing plates: cyan, blue, red, yellow, and black. Those are your 4 printing plates: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. All of them at full strength is 400%. That's too much ink for paper. So in the 90s, they always told us these 4 colors can only add up to 240%. So you can have 100% blue, 100% red, and 100% yellow, and no black. That's the darkest you want to go, so the paper doesn't warp. The Photoshop default black is 300%. And I've seen guidelines that say, oh, that's good, 300%. But 300% is not good on this paper. It is too much for this paper. Matter of fact, when I was... This right here... Let me open it up. This black right here is 400%. I mean, not 400%. 240%. This is 60% cyan, 40% magenta, 40% yellow, and 100% black.
Does this cover
get darker than that?
Does this cover have like spot varnish on the?
This has spot varnish and it's cardstock cover. But when I was talking to the printer about how to make this, he said, make the black 60, 40, 40, 100. The printer told me don't use 300%, which I usually don't anyway. I use 60, 40, 40, 100. But as you can see, there's nothing. There's no varnish or fourth color on this black.
It's kind of matte. Yeah.
That's as black gets. You don't need to go to 300%, but people do because they don't know.
What
They just
do
use
you have?
Photoshop to fall black and oversaturate everything.
Well, you've been around comic book production for a long time. Like, is there any issues that you stick out to you? Like, you're like, I can tell you some of my favorite
That's the biggest one.
In terms of packaging, though, like my
Oh.
favorite packaged comic of all time to me is The Killing Joke that comes to mind because of just like the gloss of the cover, the the
Right.
raised lettering, the fifth color ink of the green, all that stuff. But there's I just that's when I started really gaining appreciation for the actual print packaging of things, But I'm trying to think over the years, like
stuff on covers.
You like what?
I like fancy stuff on covers, whatever it
Yeah.
is. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I tend to. I like it when it's as part of the book, a reason for it. The Wolverine one with the cut in it, I thought was neat for a special thing, but unfortunately, you have the problem with every few issues will have some kind of special stuff on it.
You like when it's done tastefully and it ties into the content of the actual book.
It can be good, it can be bad.
Yeah,
that's all it goes down.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I did like the Silver Surfer. I think it was issue 50, where it was silver and the raised lettering. Those are pretty neat and stuff like that.
Well, see, to me, The Killing Joke was like really about tasteful kind of like use of like
wow, tasteful
packaging
and Killing Joke in the same sentence.
Yeah, packaging design, and that was the first time I had, because they written in one of their columns like behind like the production of it, and that's the first time I heard the term fifth ink, because I really thought about I didn't know anything about printing process. And then I love how they continued that with like the subsequent printings of it. The next one had like the kind of like hot pink lettering, and they kept changing the lettering colors. Eventually, they dropped I guess it's called debossing rather than embossing. Debossing is when the lettering's raised. Eventually, they dropped that, but they went through at least 6, 7, 8, 9 printings where they had the raised lettering. They just changed the fifth ink color.
Yeah.
Well,
we should let Paulo get to sleep now.
Oh, okay.
I just want to show one more thing. It's from my comic shop, which is the location.
Oh, okay.
Was it Google Earth time?
Yep.
Let's go to Paulo's comic shop. Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one of Lisbon's main avenues. We used to be. You used to be able to have two car lanes going up and 2 car lanes going down, but one mayor decided to create bike lanes for the non-existent cyclists. So, which ended up creating the situation that now ambulances
don't say that around Jared. Right.
Whoops.
Don't say that around Jared, who's a cycling enthusiast.
You wouldn't be able to cycle in Lisbon.
Yeah, I don't cycle in New York City.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is the store, Kingpin Books.
A lot of stars.
As you can see, on the ground floor of a residential building, 5 stories, and it's easy to find because it's right next to the Church of Scientology.
Oh,
see,
all right. You get your L. Ron Hubbard books, and
I was going to say you could get what's it called?
Battlefield Earth.
Exactly.
So you get all your sci-fi in one area.
All right. Well, everyone have a good night out there.
All right. Speak to you guys next week.
We'll catch you all next week.
See you later.
Bye-bye.